Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another Reviewing Adam Curtis, Deepest Law 201. I am smoking today a Fonseca number 1, which is such an absurdly long cigar that whenever I have it, I feel like Burgess Meredith in Adam West Batman. Anyway, how you doing, Simon?
All good. Any tasting notes? Are we talking vanilla?
Well,
a bit of old leather.
This one has what some connoisseurs describe as forest floor, mushroom and forest floor.
It's like dead insects.
It's a lighter cigar. But yeah, it's got a lot of very subtle, maybe a little bit of marshmallow in there. The Fonseca, very popular in the Spanish market. This one. But I get it on import, kind of a lesser note. In fact, Fonseca comes wrapped in a little white, sleeve, and were connoisseurs of branding back in the day. And I think they were the first company to have the bands on the cigars. So whoever Mr. Fonseca was, he was a kind of pioneer in cigar marketing back in the 19th century. But anyway, let's not be rude to our superstar guest here, Nick Dixon. Welcome back, sir.
Thanks for having me. Yes, good to be back. I saw apparently the comments were good last time, but I managed to find the 2 negative ones, so I'll be focusing on those. And I'll be trying not to get like too digressive on the
now. Is that theme. No? I hate to digress even before we've started. I mean, I will say the first super chat has come in. And Jacob Lowe says, I can't wait to watch the next 4 minutes of hypernormalization today.
Yeah. See, it wasn't me. I said pause maybe once and the whole thing. So it wasn't me, but it was, some people are saying too many pauses. I say some people, I saw one person say that. And that, they want it to be like more on point. And maybe there were too many, but that wasn't really up to me, was it?
This is quality. It's like a thick volume of a Shakespeare play with lots of annotations that actually take up more space in the play.
That's what I worry about. These like historical documents, people go back and it's just me sort of dissing some comedian or something.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I get my question was, you said, you went through all the comments and then you fixated on the 2 negative ones. Do you think that's a comedian thing? Do you think that's a kind of like if you're in a room and there's one heckler or there's one guy who's like sitting there with his arms folded, I'm not laughing at this shit. Is it like, does that guy start to you start to think about him more, do you think?
It's a good question. I mean, what happened to me there was I was just trying to put the link on my Substack and I saw 2 comments and then I got in a huff because I'm like, this is quite a lot of my time. I'm not, obviously it's an honor to be on the channel, but it's not so much of an honor that I want to take abuse. So I was like, hang on, I'm giving up my time here for not, I'm not going to say no reason. That would be, because obviously it's a great channel, but
he's honor minimizing.
Yeah. I mean, I just thought, come on, but so I just saw them by accident, but to answer I wasn't neurotically looking at them. I never looked again. But just to answer your question in general, yeah, there is a bit of a thing because imagine you're on stage. There's always one guy in the front, arms folded, face like a slapped ass, just looking across to his girlfriend to like confirm that it's rubbish, although she's actually laughing. And there's just always that one guy. And what Mickey Flanagan said was you just have to Photoshop him out of your mind. Because he's just there. He's not always there. It makes it sound like I was rubbish, but
it does seem like they're always there.
He's often there.
It does seem like they're always there. There's always a pathology of. I went and saw Leo Kirst do a set a few years ago.
Rubbish. No, just kidding.
but there was, as you say, there was the guy deliberately placing himself, aggressively folding his arms in the front row, looking sour. And it seems that every gig has got someone like. I mean, are they kind of drawn? Is there a sort of special pathology that's drawn to do that?
It's a great question. I've said that before. I did one gig. The guy was like being rude in the front. He was on his phone. Then he heckled me with something. I think he pretended to be from somewhere that he wasn't. I could sort of tell he wasn't. turned out to be the guy from Guido Fawkes. I'm like, why is the guy from Guido Fawkes heckling me at the front?
Who, Paul Staines?
Yeah. And that's just been in my mind ever since. Every time I'm like, Guido, I'm like, oh, this guy. Because it's like, you're on stage. You really don't want that. But yeah, it's good. Why do people do it? I don't know.
I can tell, Nick, that you've never given the 9 a.m. Monday morning Shakespeare lecture to fresher undergrads, right? Now, if you want to talk about tough gigs, 9 a.m. Monday morning, okay? The entire front row has got a face like a slapped ass. They've been out all weekend. They're still sitting there in their pajamas, eating like literally just eating cold beans out of a can. And you have to, talk to them about Othello or some bullshit, It's,
did you get heckled in Middle English or what?
No. I mean, the thing is, though, because the bar is so low when you're giving a lecture, you almost have kind of like vicar's rights, right? So
Yeah.
if it's a joke, it's fucking hilarious, One of the two jokes, Nick, was, as I've shown here in my favorite program, MS Paint, brought the house down. Now, that's not a funny joke, right? But in the context of a 9 a.m. Shakespeare lecture, it's fucking hilarious,
Yes, I see what you mean. Absolutely. Yeah, so you've got that privilege. You don't have to get constant laughs. And the other thing, sorry, I can actually top that because I've done Edinburgh gigs with like 4 people in the crowd, which is everyone who's done the Edinburgh Festival has had this experience, even the greats. And you've got to go for an hour-ish with 4 people. It's physically impossible. You can't get an atmosphere going. You can't get laughs going. Even if they did laugh, it wouldn't make any impact, and you'd immediately be on to the next. You wouldn't get that break between lines.
And one of the tricks I picked up in my days of being a conference producer in the city, I always remember I was at this event in Chicago, right? All of these high-powered banking guys were there, and this dude was speaking in the after dinner slot, in the after lunch slot, right? Everybody's kind of falling asleep. Oh God, how much longer can we talk about market data? Boring. And this guy, he came on, he said, right, first thing I want everybody to do, get up, twirl around, shake the hand of the person next to you, right? And afterwards I was at the drinks thing with him, and I was saying, well, what was that all about then? Why did you get everybody to stand up? He was like, yeah, the trouble is I needed to change the energy in the room, right? And I used that trick. So, for example, when I was teaching Othello, my lecture was on the difference between A.C. Bradley's reading of the play and G. Wilson Knight's reading of the play, right? Where, the focus of interest, one set of critics was like the important character, the interesting character is Iago. It's all about the motiveless malignity. It's all about, why is Iago such an evil bastard? And Othello is just kind of there, right? And then there's another way of reading the play, which says actually Iago's just a stock villain. The really interesting thing is Othello and like what makes him snap and all this sort of stuff. Okay. And so I used to get the entire class, even if it was like 80 people, 100 people there, to go and stand in a corner of the room if you're on Team Iago or Team Othello, right? Now, this exercise took about 5-6 minutes to get everybody up, everybody to the corner of the room, but it changed the energy. People were like laughing and joking, and that kind of morning slumber was destroyed by the whole energy of having to like go to the corner of the room. So I was, maybe you could do that in Edinburgh, Nick.
Well, luckily I'm retired, but that's smart. And you're like the kind of Robin Williams in Dead Poet Society of lecturers, really, in many ways. Those are the kind of tricks he used, weren't they? Yeah, there was a guy who took that really far in Edinburgh show I was watching, and a comedian. The energy wasn't there in the crowd, so he got the crowd to massage the shoulders of the person in front of them. But I thought that was inherently immoral and disgusting. So I just like, I'm not gonna. You want me to touch for strangers? I thought it was disgusting. So I was like, that's going too far for me. But it definitely brought the energy up.
Well, one of the things
that's definitely going to go down well at universities now, isn't it? Like just reach out and start.
Yeah, I'll be in AA's Me Too, and then he got people to give shoulder massage. Yeah.
Well, one of the things I did.
Sorry, go on.
I used to teach Glenn Ross on this drama course. I basically just picked all my favorite plays. I was like, yeah, I have it. Rope, Glenn Ross. What else did I pick? Birthday Party. Stick them all in. All my favorite dark, just relentlessly dark plays all the way down. But I used to get them to play John Nash's "Fuck You, Buddy," which is actually something that Curtis has talked about on these streams.
Yeah.
I used to get them to play it like and another game I got them to play in a different thing was a trading game where I'd buy a pack of multi-pack chocolates, like celebrations or whatever, and I'd get, first of all, I'd just allocate them each, like you can have a Bounty, you can have a Mars bar, you can have a Twix, whatever it was, and then I'd say like, well, now you can trade, right? And the idea is that they could see like exchange was actually like a kind of, it actually gave you a more optimal chocolate bar. Okay, this was the idea. But one of the girls in one of these classes, her parents was like a hardcore communist, and she was wise to it, and she actually collectivized all the chocolate bars, right? And said, "Oh, look, it's a free. Come and take the one you want." So she kind of she communist subverted the exchange game, and I've always remembered that. I actually respect her kind of thinking outside the box there. So,
how did she collectivize them? Just brute force?
She literally just went and got them all, put them all on one table.
Absolutely classic.
Yeah.
Perfect.
She went to that Soros-funded academy for like left-wing media influencers, didn't she? That's probably it.
Yeah, it really did make me laugh.
You were trying to go in there straight away with the Thomas Sowell kind of those kind of anecdotes people talk about, giving their kids pocket money for jobs and then giving it to the kids next door to show them what socialism is like.
Another time, I remember with one of the plays, I think we were doing one of the JB Priestley play, like Dangerous Corner or something like that. And I used to get them to like write on the whiteboard, write these kind of like write a kind of ideas tree on the whiteboard or whatever it was, basically so I could like go and get a coffee at Pret, give them something to do for 10 minutes. I also remember one class, there was a particularly impish group one year, and these girls just wrote on the board in massive letters the gay agenda. I was like, so I have to ask you what you mean about the gay agenda, but in the back of my mind, I was thinking like, these guys are breaking the matrix here. So
just imagine what you'd be doing now. You'd be going in there with that Thomas Carlyle essay about prisons and basing your lessons off that, wouldn't you? Incomparably brutal.
But anyway, let us please shillings. Now, I believe there was a very long stream you guys did that has had rave reviews. So why don't we mention that first?
Yeah.
Well, that's on my channel. I think it's actually Nick_Dixon if you search for it on a URL, but who does that with YouTube? So it's just Nick Dixon. And me and Simon, which I know is not the way you meant to say it, but in the North we say me and Simon, did a 4-hour, 38-minute stream. No one knows why, but it's actually been incredibly well received. And one guy watched it twice, which is extraordinary. But, a proper hardcore legend, obviously. But this was on Dominic Cummings. And I've done a Dominic Cummings stream before that did quite well about his Pharaoh's Foundation speech. This one was an interview that wasn't even that good. It was a slightly boring podcast they'd done. But Simon and I made it good.
We turned it into gold. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. We broke Nick's cherry for doing, irrationally, unreasonably long streams. So he's got that out of his system now. Now he can do more reasonable length streams, but he knows where it can go.
Basically, I had to finish it on principle, even though I was incredibly tired. Because I got up for Lotus Eaters the day before. I hate getting up early. I've been going to bed very late for a long time, doing that late telly show. And then I have to get up at 8 for Lotus Eaters. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Next day, I do this ridiculously long stream. But I should have broken it into 2 parts, but it wasn't significant enough to deserve 2 parts. But then that meant we had to finish it in 1 part. Anyway, people enjoyed it. There's loads of great content. And then I just did an interview with Harrison Pitt on there that people are loving as well. He's a smart cookie, isn't he?
Yeah.
I should mention in the pro wrestling parlance, what they call that is turning chicken shit into chicken salad. That's what they call it.
Nice.
He was such a good worker. He could turn chicken shit into chicken salad.
Are you saying Simon's the chicken shit and I turned him, or are you saying the content?
We are the chefs.
The raw materials were shit, but you turned to a kind of
it's Michelin starred chicken shit now.
Yeah. What we could do next time is just not choose shit raw materials, but that would be too easy.
And the great thing was, it was like when they select people for the SAS, they make them do a massive march that takes 24 hours over the Brecon Beacons, and they put these trucks at the end. And when they're getting near the end, they say, "Look, there's the trucks. You'll be able to get in and go home to base and take your boots off and all that sort of stuff." And then just as they're getting there, they move the trucks another 5 miles down the road. And that's what I did with Nick. I kept him talking after the stream as a proper sickener to sort of
it was a real sickener.
brutalize his mind, but he came through it flying.
Luckily,
colour.
we had one total hardcore legend fan, Nigel, who was just basically a Scottish bloke drinking, and so he supplied the super chats. That's what you need: Scottish bloke drinking cider to spaff some money on it, and then it's all worthwhile.
Yeah, I have to pick up on something you said. Did I hear you correctly saying that I was like Robin Williams in Dead Poet Society?
Yeah, I did that to wind you up because he's like such a lib. I just thought that would wind you up. You wouldn't just notice. I
mean, I've told this. I've probably told the story 100 times, but I got into like real trouble at school when I basically like
you do revisionist history.
Well, I tore Dead Poet Society to shreds in an essay, and like the teacher wouldn't grade it, and they were like, "You're gonna have to redo this because you can't just kind of." And I was like, no, I will not see literature plundered for carpe diem slogans. And I just didn't get a grade for that particular essay. So that was something. But I've always kind of hated Robin Williams. Well, I say hated. I've come to realize how insidious and sinister everything Robin Williams is involved with. It's just slow. It's like somebody drip feeding poison to you, and then you're expected to say, but we love him, don't we? You love him.
So, did you see the thread on oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, just what was wrong with your essay? Why was that not gradable?
It was rubbish.
I mean, you're right, but yeah.
Well, because I basically just tore into it, and it was meant to be like evaluative or some bullshit, and I basically treated it like a kind of like Daily Mail article, I guess.
was it a boomer teacher or a Gen X teacher? Just out of interest.
No, it was a young one. It was a young one, and I always remember that same teacher.
Yeah.
Came up to me once and she said, "How do you do it?"
Yeah.
I was like, "What do you mean? How do I do it? All the stuff you write in your exams. How can you write that much in, an hour? How do you do it?" I was like,
I still wonder.
You're my A-level teacher. What are you talking about? So anyway,
I ask you the same question: how you do all those bloody books? It's the same question people are still asking to this day. But did you see that thread? That's one thing I had in mind. Did you see that thread on Dead Poet Society that totally debunks the whole thing?
No.
You've never seen that? I'll have to try and find it. Oh yeah, it's a brilliant thread that basically, the whole idea is he liberates them and he's a great guy. This just shifts it around and says, no, it's very much like your Star Wars kind of revisionist history. It basically says, no, this guy comes in. He's responsible for the death of this child by misleading him, giving him all these big ideas. He was going to be a medical student. He filled his head with all this liberal garbage, and he just basically comes in there, destroys the system that was working. They had this established system. It was sort of pro-social. All this. It's an incredible thread on how he's a sort of liberal subversive element, which I suppose is kind of obvious in hindsight. But, it's not what the movie's trying to tell us. And, he just destroys the children's lives with his half-baked individualism.
Simon, isn't that guy, what's his name? That James Carville was in that, isn't he?
Oh, Kurtwood Smith, who plays Clarence Boddicker, who plays the father. Yeah.
Can you fly?
That's
Robin?
right. He says he's you're going to go to military academy now or something like that, and then he goes off and blows his brains out.
Horace, anything you'd like to promote, sir?
I haven't put an essay out for a few months. I've just been grappling with my income, making money to live. But I did notice that somebody very notable became a paying subscriber to my Substack, and it's like, why? I won't mention the name, but it's like someone very, very rich. I mean, not that they dump loads of money on me, just the standard subscription. But
well, you need to work on that.
It's like, why are you subscribed to me 4 months after I put my last essay out? It's weird, but I will probably send
one very rich guy subscribes to mine, but I think it's just to monitor me because I dissed him. I dissed something he was involved with, and then after he followed me, I'm like, oh, he's just monitoring me.
Well, I feel like I'm being monitored as well. Yeah.
I'm sure it's the content.
I tell you who keeps on doing that to me is that Andreessen, that egghead guy, Andreessen.
Yeah.
He keeps on following me and then unfollowing me on Twitter. So,
so is it automated or something?
That's interesting.
I don't know. It's kind of because I made that video on Larry Ellison's kind of AI surveillance agenda and he unfollowed me after that. But then later on, he refollowed me, and then I think he unfollowed, and then I noticed he'd unfollowed me again, probably on Israel.
He's toying with you. It's a cat and mouse game. I mean, he follows me, and I was quite impressed. But then I noticed he follows 26.9 thousand. So I'm like, I'm not that impressed with myself anymore.
Yeah. Now, given that we've been talking about Shakespeare, it's been a very long time, Simon, since I played the Foundations of Shakespeare ad. Yes. And I thought, given that we've been talking about thespians and the art world and Dead Poet Society and so on, we should give your vocal stylings another run out.
Absolutely. So, I look forward to another residuals check for £1.75. Thank you. Who was Shakespeare? What if everything you have been taught about Shakespeare is wrong? What you need is a non-woke university-level Shakespeare course based on solid scholarship, stripping out all recent nonsense since 1980. A comprehensive introduction to studying Shakespeare, featuring 14 lectures and covering 8 major plays. A Midsummer Night's Dream, As You Like It, Twelfth Night, Measure for Measure, Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, and Macbeth. Foundations of Shakespeare. Buy it now from the Academic Agency.
So, Simon, that ad is better than I recall. I didn't put that together. That's too good for me.
It was
somebody else made that. Somebody else must have made that.
Oh yes, it was one of our loyal followers. It might have been Port Film Co-op. I don't know. It could have been him.
Yes.
But I'm just I'm just an actor. I'm just a whore. I just did what I was asked to do.
All right. So there's a couple of little items before we get going here that I'd like to touch on, as if the intro hasn't been long enough. One of the things that I noticed on Twitter before we came on, that Carl Benjamin has challenged Nick Fuentes to a debate me, bro, on the marriage question, right? And you see, the funny thing is that even as an older chap who has been married twice, I should say, and is married, I find myself sympathizing with the perspective of the younger guys on this, and increasingly not on. I don't subscribe to the trad messaging, simply because historically men were always compensated for the whole burden of getting married, and there were quite a lot of things in it for him as well. Whereas now it just seems like you're taking on a lot of burden, right? I mean, it's a little bit like what you said, Nick, right? You come in on this show, it's an honor and so on, but you're going to take abuse on top of it, right? What about the abuse you're going to take on a sit? What about the abuse you're going to take when you actually get married? And then, because of the modern world, the bloke has very little comeback, because if he gets angry or shouts or whatever, well, that's abuse. That's abuse in today's world, right? And there are all these kind of recourses that and kind of resources and ways available then. So there's basically no, talking about Shakespeare, right? Because I mean, one of the reasons I think this is because reading Chaucer, reading Shakespeare, reading the history of literature, seems to me that women have always been the same, right? There was never this time where women were these kind of innocent angels who were completely submissive and so on. I think they've always been a pain in the ass, right? Nobody can read Canterbury Tales and tell me that the women in the Middle Ages weren't a pain in the ass, because every single woman in Chaucer is a pain in the ass. And the same with Shakespeare, right? All of the women in Shakespeare are massive pains in the ass. But of course, there's that whole process in Taming of the Shrew and so on, where at some point, even Beatrice, even the most kind of feisty, masculine woman, ultimately puts her hand under the boot of the husband in submission, right? Now, this is still the theory espoused by the trads, right? But in practice, and I've seen this up close, every single trad, cath, waifu is exactly the same. They spend 2 hours talking about all the things the man should be, but on top of that, they want to sit there opining about politics and still being the girl boss. I actually watched this up close with Carl at an event we went to recently. So I kind of find myself on the against the trad perspective is income. It's basically just telling men sign up to this kind of pretty shit deal, and that's it basically. It's not good, is it? Go on, Nick. Sorry.
No, I was going to say that's the problem with it. But the incentives are all wrong now. Women have always been the same, as you say, but there are incentives to keep them in line. They couldn't vote, obviously, because that was an insane idea, giving them the vote and all that. So the point is, there were incentives, weren't there, and structures in place that kept things working properly. Those are gone now. All the incentives are the other way. You can just divorce a man, famously take all his money, blah blah blah, custody, all these things. I sound like a total. I sound like a Manosphere channel now. But I've gone MGTOW for those.
But we had to do this on your stream on Saturday night. I had to sort of do apologia and say things like, honestly, I love women, but it's absolutely true. I mean, it's, my attitude is much closer to as Mr. D on popular opinions. That I basically, we're a similar age, and we're different sides of the sexual preference divide, but nonetheless, I completely agree.
Butter divide, as it were.
Yeah.
But you agree with him, yeah?
Totally, yes. I mean, he is right. I mean, but you come to the same. We all converge on the same conclusions in the end. They are just different, and you find ways to tolerate them. I've found in my life, after about the age of 36, they just go mad. They just go unreasonable and insane.
That's true. I'm worried now about the females listening, but that is actually true. If they don't have children, that is, and then they're going to hate me for that. But
I have a deep love for them.
Go insane.
Yeah,
obviously, yeah. But so AA is saying though that despite all the trad rhetoric, you go to a bloke's house and he's still kind of allowed in the man cave between certain hours. And what you're saying, he's cooked in reality. Is that your point?
Well, I'm just saying that. I mean, it's basically a position of. How can I put this? It's basically become very difficult to be that patriarch, right? And I know there are tons of. There's that the Eaton guy who's got a YouTube channel devoted on how to be. But if you actually watch the stuff, or if you actually listen to any of the advice, you basically have to be a saint. You basically have to have iron self-discipline and the kind of patience of an absolute saint. And it just results in coming to the acceptance that women just never take responsibility for anything whatsoever, which is basically what you have to do if you're married. But I have an even deeper point, right, even beyond all of this, which is that I've got Thomas Carlyle's on heroes, hero worship, and the heroic in history. Okay, at no point in any of those essays does Carlyle say, and the most important thing about this dude is that he was married and had kids. Carlyle famously, I mean, he was married, but he didn't have kids, right? Evelyn didn't have kids, right? But lots of, what I'm saying is lots of great men in history, it doesn't really matter if they had kids or not. Isaac Newton, was he married? Did he have kids? Yes or no? Does it even fucking matter? It doesn't matter. Okay.
They procreated intellectually, you could say.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is a man can aspire to a higher purpose, right? So his highest purpose is never going to be and should never be, I'm married and I've got a kid. Okay, or I've got kids. That can never be the highest purpose because you can aspire to more. And this is why I tell people to read Evolar's Eros and the Mysteries of Love, because he actually explains something in there that I think is not readily understood, which is that women are actually more material. They're more grounded. They're more biological. They're actually more invested in the reproductive cycle. Okay, and they're connected to the earth. Whereas men are abstract. They're kind of, and it's go on, Nick. Go on.
When you said material, I just want to nip in the Graham Chapman, the Monty Python member who died, in his autobiography, A Liar's Autobiography, he tried straight relationships when he was at university, and he fell out of love with it because he said basically the problem I had was women wanted to live a life that was very middle class.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
I'd say I've tried relationships as well. I've even been engaged, so it's not like I'm not coming from a total incel perspective, but I agree with you, AA. I've always liked your post on that. And I cited before the stream Jesus as a decent example, didn't have kids, but, you know, pretty influential, probably the biggest influencer out there. So, and I was thinking, not to compare myself to Jesus, but I was thinking, you know, if I'm putting out all this content and doing all this work, and, you know, in a way, isn't that the equivalent for me and Jesus was to spread the message, but without actually having your own children?
No,
I mean, even
that's a Richard Herring joke, Nick. That's for other people to do.
Oh, no.
I want to compare yourself to Jesus. That's for other people to do. No,
we're talking about Herring again 2 streams in a row. I don't want to
Sorry.
No, it's fine. I mean, but there is something in that. You get this idea now that trad people, and people, it tends to be people who have kids like Carl and Ed that say it, and of course I love them both, but they say things like, oh yeah, you've got to have at least. I mean, Ed at one point was saying you couldn't vote without 3 children or something. Like, they always add the children thing in. I'm like, obviously women shouldn't vote. We all agree on that. And then it's like property I could get on board with. There are certain things I get on board with. But then you say, and you've got to have 3 children. I'm like, why? And that's where you've lost me. And I think you're completely right. Why can't a man aspire to do more? And we talked about Fuentes in this connection. Yeah, he's out there with a whole following, totally against the grain, persecuted and so on, whatever you think to him. And yet he's doing it completely solo. There's a long tradition of that, as you say.
It's the old New York Jewish stand-up comedy joke. Why do Jewish men die before their wives? Because they want to.
All right. So there's a couple of other things we wanted to touch on. Oh yeah, this advert, Simon. The advert.
Oh yeah. So people will have seen going around the traps this week the Coinbase crypto advert, which I thought was interesting, and it is, in my view, a real life example of hypernormalization. You'll see why if we just can run that, and then I'll just do a little bit of comment on that before we plunge into Curtis.
We ain't got no troubles, no reason to complain. 'Cause here in great old Britain, we just love it when it rains.
Morning.
We're cozy here at home,
Even though it's not our own. But wait a few more years and who can say? Everything is just fine. Everything is grand. Your life can get no better when you're living by the letter in this pleasant land. Everything is just fine. Everything is great. The streets can't get no cleaner, nor the rat meat any leaner. No, life is just first rate.
Everything is just fine.
These fish fingers are a steal.
Price is up a smidge.
Just 100 quid a meal.
Empty purse, but hey, could be worse if there was nothing in the fridge.
Strategic realignment means I get to work for myself. Yeah!
Paying off my law degree with tips from each delivery. Excuse me, sir, I have your tandoori. Everything is just fine. Everything is grand. Your life can get no better when you're living by the letter in this pleasant land. Everything is just fine. Everything is great. We're soldiering on. We're doing our bit.
We're off to Dubai. It's time to jump ship.
We're tightening our belts with a stiff upper lip. 'Cause everything's just fine.
Wow. Okay, Simon, what do you want to say about this then?
What do you make of that? This is an advert by a big London creative agency. Our friend Ferro will know of them. They're called Mother. And it's the brainchild of a chap called, there's 2 of them who run Mother. There's one called Tom Bender and another one called Tom Corcoran. And this advert was directed by a guy, Steve Rogers, does a lot of kind of very high-spec adverts. The Creative Review, which does kind of a look and analysis at the latest in sort of advertising. It's kind of a trade paper. It says, everything is fine, highlights the failings of the current economic system to ask whether there is an alternative to the status quo. And that's a very Adam Curtis kind of question. But I picked this ad in particular because this is, in my view, an example of real life hypernormalization. Tom Bender, the Mother CEO, says, We identified that the true problem in people's lives isn't any single thing, but rather the collective resignation we all hold about how things work or don't work, the inertia of accepting the status quo. Our aim with Everything is Fine is not to dictate, but to offer a suggestion that there could be an alternative.
Interesting. Now, given that they're Coinbase, are they coming at this from
Presumably
a
this-
libertarian perspective, or
Presumably the solution is buy their crypto, I take it, or whatever.
That advert is pitched at white people, right? I mean, there's a couple of other faces, but that is pitched at white customers, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a kind of UK mode, but it's pitched at your sort of liberal, where you've got to laugh, haven't you? You've got to laugh about it all. That kind of attitude, which is kind of
like there's still opportunities to be had even amid the chaos.
Was this banned?
You can still make money.
Sorry, some people are saying this was banned in the UK. Is that true? Or banned on TV?
Not aware of that.
Okay, some people are
pretty expensive, isn't it?
Some people are saying, actually, the CEO, co-founder and CEO at Coinbase says our ad, which got banned in the UK by the TV networks, has sparked quite a reaction. So I guess it did then, if he's saying it.
I mean, that's curious, because I bet, that advert, that was like 2 minutes or more.
2 minutes, that's all. It was, yeah.
I can see a lot of money, like like the TV channels. Are they under pressure from the banks? Because the banks and the government, I think on behalf of the banks, they try and stop people using crypto in Britain. They try and make it really difficult without actually making it illegal. So I wonder if that's bank pressure from the banks.
Yeah, he says there are people in the UK who still think of crypto as some kind of gambling product and have completely missed the potential of crypto. So maybe they got it on a gambling basis. I don't know. I need to look into it. What? Go on.
I was going to say that something about this advert, even though it's coming from Coinbase, also seemed like I can imagine the typical Politics Joe watcher, or the average Magic Grandpa fan, the Corbynista, also liking this advert. Like, it wasn't. I think I get the impression it was made for leftists, not for rightists.
Yeah,
right. It was kind of because the guys going to Dubai. I'm pretty sure that was a veiled attack on reform. Because I know
Isabel Oakeshott.
Well, it's been a talking point, hasn't it? That reform are registered in Dubai, something for tax purposes. So I know that's been a kind of in normie world. That's a talking point to try to hit Farage with. So
you may be right, but it's still what's interesting to see is something this well produced, high spec, as Simon says, that is a sort of accurate satire, because we haven't had this for so long. We had brass eye and all these things back in the day. But now we live in this weird sort of Soviet world where we're not allowed to have well-made things that criticize the regime, right? So we don't have good.
Sorry, Nick, I'm not having Stalin attacked in that way.
Oh, so you're sorry. I forgot which channel I was on. I'm so sorry. I was trying to do a normie reference. Obviously we're all.
Can you please self-reflect and learn? Self-criticism is very important to Stalin, as I've learned. So
struggle against your own bourgeois fetters.
You're right. I was using a sort of generic example that I thought the normies would understand. Obviously, I forgot which channel I was on temporarily, and obviously we all pledge allegiance to Joseph on this channel. But but so we can't ever have things like this, can we? Well produced that have critiques that are actually accurate. So it's a very sort of strange thing to see now. This would have been a normal. Whether it was a comedy or an advert, it would have been normal in the past, but now you're like, oh, that's interesting. That's actually quite good, even if it is aimed at the Corbyn fans. But by the way, I'm voting for Corbyn. I put out yesterday, not sure whether to vote Reform or Corbyn Party, both far left with charismatic leaders.
Yeah, did you see? I did a poll. Right? Yeah. Let me just show this.
I saw the poll. I voted it.
This has got to be like of slight concern to Reform, because this is like a poll of people who follow me, who you'd imagine are basically all, of the quote unquote right, rather than, or the sensible centre, you might say. Look, 70% of those people who voted said Corbyn. Only 30% said Farage.
There are people like me voting Corbyn, sort of to take the piss. So you have to factor miscreants like that in.
Yeah, I'm voting Corbyn. Magic Grandpa.
But if you look at the poll, I mean, how many of the 70% are serious? I for one don't even know if I'm serious. So you've got to factor in these people who are just clicking Corbyn.
No, I'm voting for Corbyn unless Lowe takes over the Tories or runs in some way. I am not. Farage has got so bad now that J.K. Rowling is calling him woke.
I know.
J.K. She's playing. Farage is being flanked from the right by J.K. Rowling.
They took a view.
Basically, a shit-lived feminist. Anyway, go on, Nick.
No, I was going to say I got too excited. They took a view on trans. It was like the SNP view. It's like to the left of 99.9% of the country. An issue that's already been won. They're like, tell you what, we'll resurrect this one for the far left. It's the most insane. Obviously, not the far. I don't attack. I know you're a far lefty now, but for the woke, they took the most woke possible stance on they snatched defeat from the jaws of victory on that issue. Then they all come out and said, well, we don't think the thing that we just said. Well, why did your new justice, whatever she is, say it? And then Anne Widdecombe also said it. It's like, well, can't you? They can't have message discipline with 5 people, or they actually believe what they're saying, which is worse.
You've got to get on board with my Stalin stuff, right? Because think about where we're angling things. For 2029, we have to flank Bastani from the left. He's not going to. Bastani's not going to respond to flanking from the right. He may respond to flanking from the tanky angle.
Also, we have to.
I'm more of a comrade than you, Bastani.
You're right. And when Corbyn's party wins, we want to have our credentials already documented as well, don't we? You'll be like, I think you can. I point to my 40-minute video on Stalin.
I offended the Soviet Union. Thank you. Has Jeremy Corbyn done that? Even he hasn't.
But the thing is, we all know by Twitter logic, you've exchanged words with Bastani on Twitter, so you're now associated with him. So by your Twitter logic, that means you endorse him.
Well, I'm part of a clandestine Iranian plan to take over Britain.
Yeah, I just said it now. It was meant to be clandestine.
Well, it's out there now.
Yeah.
So, we just conspire all day, every day. Me and Bastani,
I have to confess, I haven't clicked on your video yet because I clicked on the James Lindsay one first, and I got too into that one, and then I haven't got round to the Stalin apologia.
There may be a payoff where these two angles come together, because as I'm learning, basically, I would say 95% of all the things that James Lindsay says were said by Trotsky in like 1935. It's amazing. Like Trotsky basically wrote the worldview of all of the people like James Lindsay, all of it, like the whole framing, including like buzzwords like anti-Semitism and like the whole deal, the whole package, the whole frame is Trotsky's. I just think this is like one of those things that nobody talks about enough.
This is going to be fantastic when you're down there at the Novara studios and you're literally rinsing Ash Sarkar for not being hardcore enough on camera.
Ash Sarkar is, she's a faker, really. She's a faker. She's just a white liberal in a brown body.
She's a scene girl. She's an it girl.
Absolutely. All right. So shall we get on to hypernormalization, or is there anything else you want to mention here?
No, I'm going to do an interruption probably fairly soon into it anyway. So strap in.
I want the chat to make a bet. Who is the first interruption going to be? Is it going to be Simon? Is it going to be Horace? Is it going to be Nick? My money's on Simon, personally.
Curtis always starts his documentaries with some ludicrous first statement, so I couldn't help it last week.
Last week must have been a record, Horace. I literally pressed play and you were like, pause. All right,
it's his fault.
Let's get on.
I will pause briefly just to ask. just a quick one, Simon. What is this Pie Corner audio?
It's Pie Corner audio, the Black Mill videotape. I've posted the track up today, and there'll be more if you want to know.
Thank you.
I could get into this Soviet wave. The
original dream of the Soviet Union had been to create a glorious new world. A world where not only the society, but the people themselves would be transformed. They would become new and better kinds of human beings. But by the 1980s, it was clear that the dream had failed. The Soviet Union became instead a society where no
Sorry to pause it, but these are the actual effects of Mikhail Gorbachev's policies. Okay, I think it's very important. Everybody says, "Oh yeah, look, the Soviet Union failed." This is when this is right deviation here that we're seeing. Right, this is something that nobody you always see the same footage. It's always the same footage. You don't see people punching each other in Stalin's Russia in the supermarkets. I tell you that much. Oh, the food was piled high. It was piled high.
Farage is going to be our Gorbachev. That's how it's going to go.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was Morgoth, wasn't it? Who called Trump the America's Gorbachev. That call is looking better and better as the weeks go on, isn't it? But
one believed in anything or had any vision of the future.
Pause. So this is really quite an interesting thing. You think it's a sort of throwaway shot there of Lenin lying in state in the mausoleum in Moscow. The guy Alexei Yurchak, who coined the term hypernormalization, he's done some sort of fascinating work actually on the phenomenon of the corpse of Lenin. He has an essay called Lenin's Bodies, which I looked into a little bit, and there's a sort of interesting lecture. Yurchak is a sort of a Russian American. He teaches at UC Berkeley, but he's incredibly interesting about what Lenin, the corpse there, represents. And Adam Curtis is saying, they have no vision of the future. What they have is these idols, and the idol is a sort of thought-terminating cliche of ideology in Yurchak's view. The interesting thing about the body of Lenin was, when it started, he died in 1924, but there was a period of illness when he was, if you like, ejected from politics. He had a stroke and he was sent out to live in a dacha in the country. And while he was still alive, the phenomenon that AA will be familiar with from Shakespeare studies, we've mentioned it before, the idea of the king's two bodies comes into play. And this happened with Lenin. So even as his physical self was kind of ejected from politics, already they were starting to create the iconic Lenin images for propaganda purposes. And in the sort of discourse of the two bodies of a king, this is the idea of Lenin becoming doubled and canonized. And at the same time as he himself was physically non-present but alive, his other self was being propagated through this process. The interesting thing about the actual body itself was they had a lot of debate about whether to actually keep the body in the beginning. Trotsky argued against preserving the body because it creates a kind of religious relic, and this, Trotsky said, was against Marxist principles. However, the Soviet leadership, they settled on this process of doing a kind of interval re-embalming. At first, when they displayed the body, it was quite chilly in Moscow. But then, by the time the summer came round, the body started to show little signs of decay. So what happened? It's really quite a fascinating but morbid digression you can go on about the Lenin body. But what they did was they eventually settled on these processes of taking the body and injecting it with these kind of synthetic fats to replace the ones, because when your body dies, the fats break down, they hydrolyze. But they came up with actually quite a sophisticated solution of monitoring the body, and every 18 months the body's taken out for maintenance. I mean, some of you might have seen there are videos floating around of the kind of annual or 18-month Lenin body wash, where they take him out of the mausoleum. And it's a process over a month where they suspend him in various kinds of, re-embalming fluids. And the interesting part about it that Yurchak settles on is that over time, at the cellular level, most of Lenin's body is being replaced. Yeah. I mean, there's points where when they start to display the body, in the mid-20s and going on into the 30s, you get people in Russia actually arguing about whether it's the real Lenin or whether it's a wax Lenin. And people actually shop other people to the secret police because of this. And this goes on over time, that there's this sort of simmering debate underneath about whether he's the real Lenin still. It seems that what happened is in the 1930s, to try and scotch the rumors, they invited over an American journalist called Louis Fisher, and he was allowed to come over, and they took the glass off the sarcophagus, and Louis Fisher reached in and he kind of tweaked Lenin's nose backwards and forwards and said, yeah, it's a real body. And this has happened with a lot of the kind of preserved bodies of political leaders. There was a lot of speculation about Eva Peron. Basically what happened with her is embalmers did display her body, but they said, we've basically stuffed her full of wax. They actually used to call her the candle. And they talk about things like Jeremy Bentham as well. Famously his body's on display, but apparently it's only the skeleton which is just padded out, and the head is a wax replica, because I think the original head is kind of sort of long since rotted, but that's on display in London. Mao's body is swapped out with a wax double for maintenance. So that's how that kind of works. But the thing about this question of whether it's the real Lenin feeds into this idea of the two bodies, the sort of body mortal with the intrinsic characteristics of kind of sort of divine leadership, and this sort of body divine which migrates to a new monarch when the actual mortal body dies. I mean, there were lots of arguments, even up to 2008, there were arguments about how much of Lenin's body remained, because the process of putting these synthetic fats in pretty much replaces, they took all his organs out, so all of that stuff has gone. And then the actual constitution of his body, there was an argument about whether it was 10% Lenin or 23% Lenin that was left, because there's two, if you like, forms of gaze, as they say, on the Lenin body, because regularly the Soviet leadership, the technocrats, would view the body, and the preservation was actually really, really well done. And the body was very kind of supple and mobile. The joints moved, the neck, the hands moved, and all of that. But the contrast is with the proletarian gaze, is the people who watch the body from the outside just see a body that's unchanging. So it is kind of an interesting sort of, propaganda tool, the Lenin body. What you then find is Yurchak is talking about the moment of crisis with power at death. And he does a very interesting little discursus on how, the royal families in the UK, when there was a funeral for a king or a queen, there'd be an effigy made, a wax effigy. And interestingly enough, a lot of these have been preserved so that when people came to the funeral, there would be obviously the body lying in the coffin, but you would also have an ultra realistic, as much as they could do it anyway, wax effigy, real hair, dressed in clothing, even to the extent that sometimes courtiers would come to the funeral and get confused and think it was the king sort of standing there, and they, kind of make their obeisance, all that sort of stuff. But what as I say, Yurchak settles on is this idea of the moment of crisis at death, and the effigy kind of staves off any kind of doubt about the transfer of power. Yeah. And a thought that occurred to me looking at all this stuff was thinking about the way that with Donald Trump, he's created sort of ahead of his death and kind of, outside of his necessary exclusion from being able to kind of, be there with the people all the time. He's created this kind of effigy of his own name, the Trump name being plastered everywhere. Mm-hmm. It's a kind of, do you remember that bit in The Century of the Self? When it got to the sort of end of the journey of The Century of the Self, you had that scene with Tony Blair. He's holding up that sort of image of his own head. And I talked about, I talked about how the sort of the kind of the apotheosis was complete. The man had become the product, and the product, became the prime minister. So he was the investment of all the desires that people put into materiality. And he's become both this real ruler and he's become this idea as well. And the Trump name, that we talk about seeing plastered on the sides of planes and buildings and so on, it's that moment where you've become the brand. So he's created his own doubling, and he's done it in advance, but it helps stabilize his power in an age of image. And one thing that Curtis often talks about with the problem of the time, the problem of this time in particular, that he reviewed in Century of the Self was, and more so in The Trap, is how our investment in radical individualism is not actually reacting against the system and forging independence. It actually feeds the nature of the power of the system, because the system operates on the basis of selling you radical individualism as the ultimate expression of yourself. And so when, in a sense, you're participating in this performative doubling of the king by the meme or the brand name, you're actually contributing to his power, in a sense, in the system. It reinforces that over the disorganized mass. So, you really have to think, the next time you post the Trump meme, think what you're doing, because
this is all very interesting, Simon. I mean, as you were talking, I was reminded a little bit of the, there's this esoteric principle, as above, so below, right?
Yeah.
As whatever happens in the material world is mirrored in the immaterial world. And this has a correspondence in Marxist theory, which is called base and superstructure, right? The base is the material thing and the superstructure is the ideology. What's really interesting is that, you were saying how, most of Lenin's actual body had been replaced, and he was only like 20% Lenin left.
Yeah.
When Lenin died, there was this great splintering in the Soviet leadership. Okay. Stalin had the notion of socialism in one nation. Okay. Bukharin wanted to continue this thing called the NEP, the New Economic Program, which Lenin had to do in an emergency in the early 1920s to keep things going there. And then you have what is known as the left opposition. So, I mean, there's Trotsky, who is kind of his own thing. And then there's this guy called Zinoviev and his buddy Kamenev, who were left, that they kind of, they were called the left opposition. Okay. And they were committed to things like permanent revolution. But basically what happens is, in all of their arguments, so in Stalin's argument, in Trotsky's arguments, in Kamenev's arguments, and in Bukharin's arguments, every single one of them says, this is what Lenin would have wanted. I am staying true to Lenin.
Yes.
Right? Every single one of them is the true heir to Lenin. Okay. Yeah. And if you read even Trotsky's later writings, right, when he's writing in the late 30s and the early 40s, he was killed in 1940, but some books came out after that. He accuses Stalin of betraying the memory of Lenin. Okay. And there's this testament that is written, or allegedly written by his wife, by Lenin's wife, which then becomes this kind of this site of controversy. Okay. Yeah. And now obviously Stalin wins out in the short term by consolidating power and having his version of Leninism become the official one. And then all the other guys are exiled, purged, killed. Okay. But then subsequently, okay. And so one of the things is, from the perspective of all of the guys who lost, the Soviet Union had a little bit become like Lenin's body, where it's only 20% Lenin left, because socialism in one nation was a perversion of the purity of Marxist-Leninist thought, and had become what they call Stalinism. From Stalin's point of view, he was actually just continuing Lenin's works, and that's something for people to argue over. But what's interesting is that after Khrushchev gives his secret speech, Stalin, when he died, had his body put in that. They put his body in that mausoleum, and one of the things that happened as a result of the secret speech is they took Stalin out of the mausoleum. He was no longer allowed to be there, near Lenin or as part of the kind of pantheon. So it was kind of like he almost becomes Jesus or something, like communist Jesus, basically, is what he becomes.
Absolutely, yeah. This is it. I mean, this is what Yurchek talks about. He talks about how Lenin is endlessly reconstructed so as to remain the same. Its body just becomes a conveyance for sovereign power, what he calls the foundational truth of the system. Was it? Yeah.
Right. Sorry. Well, I was just going to say, was it also the same after Stalin died, that people like Khrushchev and even after him would still pay homage? They would, obviously, Khrushchev famously denounced Stalin, but they would still pay homage to the name of Lenin, right? That carried on all the way to the end, right? And the statues of Lenin and things named after Lenin.
Even in the Gorbachov era, Horace, everything was still framed in terms of it's what Lenin would have wanted. And in America, they actually do this with the founding fathers.
Yeah.
Right. They frame a lot of their debates. Oh, well, this is what Thomas Jefferson would have wanted, you know. And to come back to your analogy with Trump, Trump is still alive now, right? But we still see it happen, right? Even in MAGA world, all of the criticism is framed as, well, he's got bad advisors. It's the people around him. It's not the king himself. Okay, this is what Trump really would have want. And now people are arguing over what is it that MAGA really means. Is MAGA Mark Levin shouting at you for not supporting Israel enough? Is it what Steve Bannon wants? Is it, you know, is it really MAGA communism? I mean, people argue over what is it that Trump really represents in almost exactly the same way as we're talking about with Lenin.
And this paragraph from Yurchak really ties in with what you're saying. He says, indeed, it was precisely the attempts of the reformers in the party leadership to return to, quote, real Lenin during perestroika and to revive Lenin's real voice that spelled the end of the Soviet project. When the old Soviet metaphor that Lenin was, quote, more alive than all of the living was finally taken literally, the Soviet Union disintegrated.
Very interesting indeed. Very interesting indeed. Any further comments, or can I continue?
Yeah, I'll just nip in with a little bit more. I mean, the interesting thing was that Lenin became this kind of lodestar, obviously, by which people. I mean, Yurchak talks about kids in school, for instance. They'd often draw pictures, and they would draw pictures of Lenin. But there was a kind of license you had to have to draw pictures of Lenin. Artists literally had to have a copy of the Lenin death mask if they were going to be licensed to draw Lenin. So if kids were drawing pictures of Lenin in school, what would happen is the teacher would say, well, that's very good, but we're not going to put that in the exhibition because you're not really kind of doing full justice to the, like you say, the foundational Jesus Lenin that has to be portrayed. So it was this kind of careful preservation of image. And one
it's not Jesus you'd think of there, though, is it? There's a slightly different prophet who that seems to align with. But sorry, carry on.
Yeah. I mean, there's an academic Kurekin that Yurchak quotes. He talks about Lenin as a mushroom, not because like a mushroom he lives on something that's rotting, but it's because he says by the end of his life, because the Lenin that the party created functioned like a substance, like a hallucinogen, that infused the party discourse with unconditional truth, regardless of what it said in any concrete historical period. I mean, he even says, that Stalin sort of had to appeal to Lenin for legitimacy in his own way. But there was over time this kind of changing of what Lenin actually meant. And as long as the actual sense of the body was there as kind of something which was, they called it, the Soviet scientists called it a living sculpture. Not a life sculpture. So it looks like, he's just asleep, and it's a sculpture in the sense that, he is mostly artificial now, in the sense of that's his body, but it's kind of semi-plastinated, a bit like, Gunther von Hagen's bodies.
I have to say, by the way, that having read Lenin, having read Stalin, and read some Trotsky now, I just think Stalin was right, that his version was the correct inheritance, because one of the major points of debate between the left opposition and Stalin was this idea of permanent revolution. Okay, and Stalin was like, look, we haven't even achieved communism or anywhere close to communism in Russia. Okay, the idea that you can just export revolution, that you can just kind of like make a communist revolution happen in a foreign country not knowing anything about them is a nonsense, right? Whereas Trotsky wanted to do what the neocons do, right? Oh, the color revolutions, we're going to bomb Iraq into democracy, all this shit, all the stuff that Adam Curtis talks about, right? They're like, literally, that is what they wanted to do, the Trotskyists. They wanted to make communism in all of the other countries, through basically like revolution from above, like kind of using Soviet power to create revolutions in every other country. And having read Lenin, like literally, Lenin was obsessed with breaking down Russian society, Russian agriculture. Like all of his books are really practical kind of assessments on how Russian society works. And the game plan that the Bolsheviks develop is very specific to Russia in and of itself. Like they are absolutely obsessed with what is going to work for Russia, first and foremost. Okay, so the idea that Lenin would have, who was a very practical guy, very not as utopian as you'd imagine he was, the idea that he would be like, yeah, okay, now let's make a revolution happen in this place that we know nothing about, right? To me, it just strikes me that Lenin was probably right. He was probably just correct in the assessment of what Lenin would have done, because Lenin was always practical, not utopian. Whereas if you read Trotsky, these guys are out of their tree. They're literally insane. Anyway, sorry, Horace, go on.
I agree that like Stalin is the proper continuation of Lenin, and most of what we hear, this is the sort of the point you've been making over the last week or two, right? That most of what we say about Stalin is through the sort of Trotsky transposed to the West lens, right? Trotskyists writing about Stalin have grossly, unduly, warped our Western view of Stalin. But Stalin was, like a genuine admirer of Lenin, carried on Lenin's logic, also carried on and expanded the cult of personality so that he could then transpose that over to his own cult of personality.
This also is a Trotsky lie, I'm afraid.
Well, I mean, okay, but in loads of ways, like Trotsky was kind of the wacky one, and Stalin was like the rational.
Seriously, though, Horace, right? On the cult of personality, it's really weird. It's really weird because Stalin continuously says, "I don't like this cult of personality stuff." Right? I don't want my birthday celebrated. Stop doing the cult of person. It's making me look bad, basically.
Yeah.
And reading who was the guy behind the cult of personality? It was Khrushchev. Literally in the 30s and the 40s, the guy who championed Stalin cult of personality was Khrushchev, and then he's the guy who gives the speech and says, "Look at this cult of personality stuff that I did, by the way." It's mental. It kind of blew my mind to discover
this is something Yurchuk talks about as well. He talks about the differences in the mid-century authoritarian regimes. They had two different conceptions of the so-called heroic agent in the regime. So in Nazism, it was the individual. You had the thing of the Führerprinzip, where it was the sort of the contact with the living person of the mustache man that gave the kind of, as you hear about it when people relate when they met him and they had the Führer contact, and it was kind of, it blew their minds. So it was the individual. Whereas in the USSR, they talked about charismatic impersonalism. So it had to be a kind of collective ideal of heroism.
Yes.
And that's why you could use the body of Lenin as a kind of plastic icon, whereas Hitler was very specific about saying, actually, I need my body to be destroyed after I die. The idea is stronger in people's heads in a way, and the Soviets don't get to kind of tout it as a trophy. But in the Soviet version, of course, the party can never be wrong. And so, the body just become instrumentalized as a propaganda.
There's also a very Russian thing. If anybody's read Russian literature will understand this. You're reading any of the Russian classics. The characters in Russian literature are not three-dimensional human beings. They're always archetypes, eternal archetypes of this is the Russian peasant, this is the babushka, this is the eternal mother type thing. Right, so and I'm pretty sure that whether they wittingly or unwittingly, and increasingly wittingly, I would say in Stalin's case, they wanted to lean into this idea of a Russian everyman. This is why they kept that guy Kalinin around for so long, because he represented just an archetype. This is the peasant. Doesn't really matter who he is or where he's from or what his personality is. He just represents a type. So it's kind of they were very, very concerned with bourgeois perversions in all of their writings, and having read personal letters between Stalin and Molotov and things like that, I don't really believe that I don't believe they were lying to themselves. I think they genuinely believed all of the stuff that they said.
Absolutely. True.
So anyway, shall we?
I just wanted to add one thing that you mentioned. I think Simon, you mentioned that it was sometimes done that people they might be, in truth, like rebelling against what Lenin was doing.
Mm.
But they would say he must have bad advisors and stuff. There's
Mm.
loads of different leaders have had that, haven't they? Like Stalin had the same. Like people who were chucked in the gulag would write a letter to Stalin saying, "There's terrible people around you. In your name, they've thrown me in the gulag or something." Knowing, of course, that it was well, I don't know. It varied how much they knew, but it was Stalin. It was all coming from Stalin. Same was done with Hitler. Like people couldn't believe it was Hitler doing the bad things, and the same was done with various like kings and stuff, like Richard II, like the Peasants' Revolt. The peasants like kept proclaiming that our rebellion is against the bad people around.
Evil councillors.
Yeah, it's always the evil councillor. Yeah,
Well, sounds like Trump term 1 as well.
Yeah.
Right. And now people see through it, right?
Is there like a parallel with Trump then? Just because the Lenin stuff's above my pay grade, but when Trump was campaigning in 2016, Bannon said it was a revolutionary movement, 1776 and all that, and Coulter when Trump sort of went off message said, "Oh, he's not being Trumpian enough." So, as you were saying before, and then Trumpism and MAGA gets to mean Musk and libertarianism, which is pretty much the opposite of what it originally meant, which was Bannon's economic nationalism and wages for American workers. And then when Fuentes holds Trump to account, it's always that he's not being Trumpian enough. So I thought there was a parallel. You mentioned this was about 3 beats ago. You mentioned this.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it is the kind of classic ship of Theseus. The parts get replaced. Is it the same thing? And obviously now Trump, we're seeing him reconfigured in a different way. He's still eternalized Trump, but he's not the Trump people think of as Trump.
I have to say as well on a serious note, I don't really like the cult of personality stuff around Hitler. Okay, I mean, I don't know if any of you watched the famous film, The Triumph of the Will, right?
Yeah.
There's a montage in that film where they have a clip of all of the famous mid-century Germans all in a row giving speeches. It's Goering talking about guns and butter and Goebbels but bashing his favorite hate group as he always did. But in the middle of that montage there's a speech by Hess, and I tell you, I mean, the speech by Hess in that I think is scary, because he is literally, it's all about the Führer, all about, how this guy basically is like a god on earth. And it's like, it's creepy. I found it when I watched it really quite sinister, the way Hess was just deifying this figure as being this kind of god on earth type thing. And it was always, I don't really like that at all.
And it was always done by a strange kind of performative dissonance as well. There was the sort of grandeur of all the spectacle that you see. I mean, watch those Leni Riefenstahl films. They are just fascinating because of the whole thing of the Nazi theatre that was set up. And yet it's done by a kind of dissonance at the center. This is always an observation people make, that when you look at the uniforms, and everybody's talked about this as a cliche now, everyone looks sensational in the uniforms, and you sort of go up the top brass and the uniforms get, more bling, but then when you get to Hitler, he wore quite a simple uniform. It was like a brown coat with hardly any ornamentation on it. So it projects that sense of a kind of the greatness of the leader reflected in a kind of performative humility as well, and a sort of an absence of any ostentation.
We'll see that when we come to Muammar Gaddafi as well, right? He remained a colonel. He took over the country, and he was absolute autocrat, but he stayed a colonel.
Yeah, you see it in the Soviet system too, as it continues, right? Brezhnev famously had all of those hundreds of medals and things. I mean, there were guys like Zhukov had a ton of medals, but he actually earned it. He actually was a war hero, right? But by the time you get to Brezhnev era, you've got these guys they've got so many medals, they're going like down further than their waist and things like that. And again, Stalin kept on they wanted to like bestow him with honors, and he didn't want them. And at one point they said, "Oh, you can be the generalissimo," and he was like, "I don't want to be the." And he's written, "I don't want this. I don't want this. It's it's bourgeois individualism and so on." He took it. He did take it.
He did become generalissimus. Yeah.
He regretted it, and actually said in a speech like, "I shouldn't have done that. Sorry, comrades." But you got to remember though, he's got all of these yes men around him, right? And it's just like Trump in a way. Trump has got it's a great idea, Mr. President. That's a genius idea, sir. Oh, you're killing it, mate, and he doesn't have any countervailing voices around him to say, like, this is a bad idea, Donald, and I get the impression that is a little bit the same. But you can imagine, like, do you imagine that all of these people want what's better, like J.D. Vance and Pete Hegseth and Rubio, like they all really want what's best for Trump, or they just kind of know how to play him? And there's a little bit of that in the court of Stalin too, where you get all these people are conniving and playing Beria and what's his name, Iron Laser, and all these guys. Like, I mean, they say he was paranoid, but like, I would be paranoid if those were the guys I had around me, wouldn't you?
I'm learning that Stalin was just a humble and chilled out guy from AA here. I'm learning so much. He didn't want any of this.
The paranoia thing was always played up a hell of a lot. He did have enemies. He did have people who wanted to overthrow him. Totally, he made loads of enemies by being cruel. I mean,
I'm just reading like incidental letters that Stalin sent Molotov, and there's this one moment where Molotov wants to take a holiday, right? He's like, I booked in a 6-week holiday, and Stalin writes to him and says, "Comrade, you're going away for 6 weeks? You can't do that. 2 weeks max." And he's like, you can't leave Kaganovich in Moscow, and like, you've got to keep an eye on him. What, you're going to just bugger off for 6 weeks and leave the government to him? I can't have that. So, I mean, it's kind of funny because Stalin was on vacation himself when he wrote that letter. So,
can I just say, in our private chat at one stage, I was thinking of opting out of doing All Watched Over by Machines of Loving Grace, and AA was straight in there. You can't go. The chat will chimp. I felt the pressure.
Man. Are you comparing yourself to Molotov now? Anyway, but yeah, I just find it kind of interesting that you have these moments where it's clear that, because if you read history books, everybody says, well, Iron Laser, he was Stalin's like, go-to enforcer type thing. He trusted him utterly and all this sort of stuff. He didn't trust him. He didn't, because he wouldn't leave the government. Like, he wanted Molotov to keep an eye on him. And I would too if I had a guy like that in the government. So
is Iron Laser a nickname for Kaganovich?
Yeah, they call him Iron Laser.
Iron Laser. That's cool.
Iron Laser. It's pretty a cool nickname. It's because he was sent to he was typically sent to make sure, we're doing a foresting project over there. Go see to it, Iron Laser, and he'd turn up. Come on, everybody do it, otherwise you'll get in jail. So anyway.
Yeah, that's why some people attribute, like people who are keen to attribute everything to a particular subset of people. They love to play up his role in the suffering in the Ukraine. But it was Stalin. It was under Stalin's authority. Stalin sent him. Like Yagoda as well, and Frankel, certain figures from.
See what Stalin would do a lot is he'd entrust people to do certain projects, and then if it got back, they killed like half the people there. Stalin would be like, yeah, you shouldn't have done that. Now you're in trouble. So this is a bit of Machiavellianism, because it means the king gets to kind of offset it to an underling. If you want, Yagoda, you were too excessive on that occasion type thing. Now you're fired. Next guy in. Oh, you've been even more too ruthless. You out. Barrier in. There's a lot of that sort of stuff. So
obviously you've criticised like crap critiques of Stalin over the last couple of weeks. There's also the ones from the sort of the National Socialist right, who you can imagine their angle on the Soviet Union. And it's like, no, but Yagoda, after his 2 years as head of the NKVD, did do a lot of brutal things. Then he was executed. So he's obviously not in charge. Like people try to pin the whole Soviet Union on those three.
I think that angle is basically wrong.
Yes, it's completely wrong. Stalin was in charge. Simple as that.
This reminds me of just lastly, well, not lastly, because I don't know if you want to carry on, but just briefly, I disproved Irving's whole thesis by watching an episode of The Sopranos. Have you ever his whole claim is that the obscure painter didn't know about anything because there's nothing about him in the documents. But if you watch Sopranos, Tony gets Christopher. He says, "Look, I don't want to be associated with this." So he says, "Like, can you just be associated with all the bad stuff from now on? I need some." I was like, It's just one episode of Sopranos. So is it?
yeah.
What about that? You just give all the bad stuff to your general. Isn't that like route one, like mafia
Machiavellian.
tactic?
Yeah, but that's I mean, what the way it's framed a lot of the times is, look, you imagine in these totalitarian states that they had total transparency and they knew everything that was going on, whereas in fact, imagine like you're in Moscow in 1930 and I don't know, something's going on in the Urals or in Siberia or something, right? I mean, the letter has to get there. You know, it may take months to actually know what's going on. And then on the ground, there's like, I don't know, the local commissar, or, you know, there's somebody who used to be a kind of a big cheese who's now kind of insinuated himself in the Communist Party. So you can imagine they had a little bit more autonomy in those places than you might imagine, right? We imagine that everything's totally centrally controlled, right? But actually there were things going on in the Soviet Union that escaped the kind of Sauron's or Stalin's eye, you might say. And then when he found out about them, he'd say, right, I'm launching an investigation into that. Or so one of the examples that we know about the excesses that went on in the NKVD, right? And if you read even mainstream history, their source for the excesses of the NKVD is Berier's own report on it. So you get this bizarre paradox that the actual documentary evidence for, let's say, coerced confessions in the Moscow trials is Berier's report on his predecessor. So it's like, okay, well, we trust Beria on this one thing, but you don't trust him in. But when you're trying to paint Beria as a monster in other areas, you don't trust anything he says. But this one report he gave, that is absolutely right. So there is all sorts of weird little things like that. And if you look into the Germans as well, there are odd things like why did they launch investigations into what was going on here, there, and everywhere? Why was a judge sent to it? I remember Curtis Yarvin wrote this piece about a judge who was sent to some camp or whatever to see like about, you know, whether the prisoners were being treated rightly or wrongly or whatever. But then it's like, well, how did that, like, why did that happen? So there are all these weird kind of internal contradictions in a system that we imagine was totalitarian or had total control. And this is one of the mistakes I think historians make a lot. They do it with Tudor England as well. You get all of these guys writing in the 90s as if Elizabeth I had like an iron grip on the country and everybody knew what was going on. It may take months to figure out that there's a rogue lord who's being a bit harsh with the peasants up in York or something, you know. Anyway, let's carry on.
Oh, there's been suggestions that we may not finish hypernormalization today, so I just thought I'd let the audience know that.
We've made it all through about 1 minute of this so far. It's been interesting though. Let's face it, it's been interesting.
Honestly, AA, if you ever want to do a separate stream about all these misperceptions about the Soviets, I love it. I'm well into that, but do a separate one.
А если у вас было желание, какое вы смогли выразить сейчас?
Чего?
Желание, если у вас есть, например, какое у вас было бы сейчас?
Чего?
Желание, мечта.
Мечта?
Да.
Ну, как вам сказать? Не знаю дальше, что вам сказать. Мечта. Раньше, не желая, не гадая, ничего не выйдет все равно.
Нет, ну
Я мечтала и гадала, у меня все наоборот идет. И теперь не верю и никогда не буду думать и мечтать.
А вы верите?
Кому?
Что?
Кому верить?
Ну, не знаю, Богу.
Богу? Никому не верю, ничего не верю. И вам тоже не верю.
Pause.
Pause.
Just interesting that they end at the same point of the Boomer Truth regime there. You know, it's like Lenin's John Lennon's lyrics. You know, I don't believe in magic. I don't believe in I Ching. I don't believe in Bible, etc. You know, I just believe in me.
Yoko and me. And that's reality.
The dream is over.
Странная прическа. Где тебя так красиво подстригли?
Знакомилась с панками московскими, а меня подстригли.
А что это за течение-то, панки?
Ну, это люди, которые любят свободу, там, не терпят насилие, там.
А ты не свободна, да?
Свободно.
Ну, мне кажется, у тебя что-то случилось.
Да, у меня ничего не Ну, у меня ничего не случилось.
Ну, ясно. Потом тогда расскажешь. Потом я понимаю, что тебе сейчас трудно говорить. В следующий раз расскажешь.
By the way, I've changed the thumbnail to that picture of Lenin now. It just seems right, given that we talked about it for so long.
Я повторяю 10 раз и снова. Никто не знает, как же мне хуёво. И телевизор с потолка свисает. И как хуёво мне никто не знает. Все это до того подзаебало, что хочется опять начать сначала. Куплет печальный, он такой, что снова.
Nice corridor shot. I'm just wondering, do we know, is this those sort of two little film clips we saw there? Is that like underground stuff, or is this on Russian state TV, or what? Because like it's admitting, you know, that things aren't good.
What do you mean? The footage of the tower blocks there with the murals?
The women, the you know, like the unruly girl and the woman depressed about her dreams.
I couldn't track that footage. I couldn't work out where it was from.
No.
It might be a BBC thing from the time, but I don't know.
One of the things I know that they were even concerned with in Stalin's time and later was they didn't want to alienate the intellectuals too much. And I know that one of the things they did from the Khrushchev era onwards is they tried to give intellectuals more freedom, quote unquote, to just talk about how shit things were, you know, in the spirit of communist self-criticism and all this sort of stuff. So you could even argue it's containment, could have been containment, but if I had to guess, it was a song from Yeltsin's era.
It's interesting. It's a juvenile detention center, and they're all talking about, you know, looking for freedom and stuff. I thought, yeah, that's what you have to do with libertarians, really.
It's safe to show, you know, a teenage girl being unhappy because that can just be put down to hormones, can't it? But the woman talking about her dreams being crushed, that seems like something an underground documentary maker would show, not the state. You know,
she's the Keir Starmer endpoint. She has no dreams anymore.
Oh, God.
She's probably just Mrs. Stalin.
The smack of firm government.
She feels shitty because she remembers how good things were back in the day.
It's got a picture on the wall. She strokes the moustache at night.
That's funny, but of course there are still loads of people like that now, let alone in the 80s, right?
Yes,
there are still. Yeah.
Like it's like the East German nostalgia, you know, where they literally have like festivals for people to go and drive their Trabants and, you know, reminisce about the old days of queues.
Like that film, Goodbye Lenin, it's not like a brilliant film, but it does capture something, doesn't it? Is everyone saying Goodbye Lenin? German film?
Yeah.
It's you know, it's about a mum. If anyone hasn't seen it, it's about a mum who's got a terminal illness, and they just want to make her last sort of year of life or so comfortable. They accept that she's going to die, but she is a solid but true believer in the East German communist state. And they just try to pretend to her that it's not breaking apart. It's not going liberal. They just keep it going for the ostalgie. Isn't that the word? Ostalgie? Eastalgia?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. She's in hospital and she doesn't know that the wall has fallen while she's been in hospital. So they have to kind of make the pretense that everything is still continuing. And
what level of Adam Curtis do we call this? Long corridor shots in the Soviet Union.
That's
That's got to be peak.
It almost goes back to the beginning. It's very similar to the shots that he has in Pandora's Box in the Engineer's Plot, where he goes to Gosplan and talks to the guys who, you know, make toothbrushes.
If he chucks a dead body and it's the full house.
Yeah, exactly. We're just missing 9 Inch Nails now.
Yeah, bit of jazz.
Those who ran the Soviet Union had believed that they could plan and manage a new kind of socialist society. But they had discovered that it was impossible to control and predict everything, and the plan had run out of control. But rather than reveal this, the technocrats began to pretend that everything was still going according to plan. And what emerged instead was a fake version of the society. The Soviet Union became a society where everyone knew that what their leaders said was not real, because they could see with their own eyes that the economy was falling apart. But
It's really, really similar to Keir Starmer's Britain, isn't it?
Yeah, I literally made that note. I was going to just beat me to it, but yeah.
Can you still can you get a dimpled beer jug like that, a glass dimpled beer jug in Keir Starmer's Britain? Because he probably tried to ban them, didn't he? ban smoking outside the doors of a pub or whatever it was. If I have a beer, I like it in one of those jugs, like with a handle. That's nice. Yeah, nice big open surface. Love it.
play along and pretend that it was real, because no one could imagine any alternative.
I love how fucking bleak that shot was.
Yeah.
So bleak, I love it.
You sit there with your table with your bowl of oranges and your beer, and that's it.
A writer called it hypernormalization. You were so much a part of the system that it was impossible to see beyond it. The fakeness was hypernormal.
Sorry to make the Trump analogy again, but aren't MAGA being a bit like this at the minute? It's the golden age. Everything's fucking brilliant. You know, take that, panicums.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Going through the motions, even though the feeling isn't there anymore.
And in this country, Fraser Nelson and all those types keep telling me that the line's gone up and everything's. I keep seeing these people. Oh, immigration's actually. We just had a guy today from the OBR say that immigration's an absolute disaster, and it's actually costing us loads of money. This guy, Professor David Miles. But at the same time, I've seen tweets saying, "Oh no, it's actually getting better." So we always have these people, right? Can I just also note, he's there. Now Yurchak coins hypernormalization, but as far as I can see, Curtis doesn't give him credit there for some reason. He says a Soviet writer, but he doesn't say his name, right?
Yeah, he has. He does go into it in a little bit, and
Okay.
I'll go on to that.
You know, the shot we're looking at right here, doesn't it look exactly like a frame from a Terry Gilliam film, Brazil or Time Bandits, something like that?
Yeah.
Really, really similar to that.
It's like one of those films about tower blocks in Britain in the 70s that I may have posted in the wake of when we did the Dodgy Flats episode. Just lonely people staring at blank televisions in their nightwear. Grim.
In this stagnant world, two brothers called Arkady and Boris Strugatsky became the inspiration of a growing new dissident movement. They weren't politicians. They were science fiction writers. And in their stories, they expressed the strange mood that was rising up as the Soviet Empire collapsed. Their most famous book was called Roadside Picnic. It is set in a world that seems like the present, except there is a zone that has been created by an alien force. People known as stalkers go into the zone. They find that nothing is what it seems, that reality changes minute by minute. Shadows go the wrong way. There are hidden forces that twist your body and change the way you think and feel. The picture the Strugatskys gave was of a world where nothing was fixed, where reality, both what you saw and what you believed, had become shifting and unstable. And in 1979, the film director Andrei Tarkovsky made a film that was based on Roadside Picnic. He called it Stalker.
Стойте, не двигайтесь. Что случилось? Зачем вы меня остановили?
Я вас не останавливал.
А кто? Вы? Черт его знает.
Pause. So, have any of you seen the film Stalker? Just out of interest.
No.
I don't think I have, actually. I don't think I have.
I have, but I watched it about 20 years ago, and watching this, I started to think perhaps I didn't even understand it. And I was going to rewatch it very vigilantly for this, but I was just too tired yesterday and felt awful, so I didn't manage to. And I thought,
yeah,
well.
It's a brilliant film. It is very Russian in that you need to, stick with it because it feels very slow, but it is an amazing piece, and it makes a lot of sense once you've watched Hypernormalization, then you go back and you watch the film and you see the film as this metaphor for the Soviet Union breaking down. I mean, I'm going to have to give some spoilers about it in a way, but essentially it's these it's set in this grim sort of Soviet town, and these three sort of broken middle-aged men. Oh gosh, I know how that feels. They take a sort of secret journey into this place called the Zone, and it's a bit different in the film. Curtis talks about the book the Strugatskys wrote. It's a kind of alien place, but the Zone in the film, it's obviously a metaphor for the Soviet Union's breakdown. It's a forbidden area, and they go into it, and the Zone it's like everything has collapsed. It's post-human habitation, post-industry. It's even post-war. You see these old battlefields from probably the Second World War that it doesn't feel like the battle has happened. It feels like it's just been put on pause. It's collapsed and it's stopped. And they go into this very disorientating world where, to us, the viewer watching it on screen, it just looks like they're wandering through a bunch of fields and old industrial sites. But they load it with a lot of tension because the rules in that world, in the Zone, are very, very different. And so there's all these hidden dangers and your perceptions break down. And the essential quest, it's almost a little bit Lord of the Rings in a way. It's these three guys, they're going off in search of a fabled room that's out in the Zone, where you go into the room and all your deepest wishes come true. And I mean, it's kind of the whole film, it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz conceived by Samuel Beckett in a way. And it ties into the idea of hypernormalization as this, you're in this disintegrating world where the rules are different. Everything seems outwardly unthreatening, but you keep pushing on because you're just continuously immiserated, and you've leaned into acceptance, living in your imagination that there's a dream that something might change, but it's completely destabilized. And you're just navigating this landscape of all the past is rotting away around you, and there's no other way. And in the film, the way the plot plays out is essentially they reach the threshold of this room where your wishes come true, and you think they're going to sort of take the wish and fix their lives. They're all, as I say, quite broken characters in a way. And the analogy with the hypernormalization is they get to that point and they then cop out completely and they don't go into the room. They talk themselves out of doing it. And that's where you're at when things are hypernormalized. You talk yourself out of the possibility of change.
We should do it, the four of us, only the destination is that mall in Newcastle that we did with more. Just be like, we have to set off from London Paddington on foot and try to make it there. Film our attempts to get up there, and then once we're outside, once we're in the car park outside that mall in Newcastle, Nick will go on a monologue about existential crisis, and we don't go in.
That's right. And they eventually return to their grim town, essentially. And,
I used to live in Newcastle, but I'm obviously missing the significance of this mall in Newcastle. It's some sort of, did you do some sort of stream on it or something?
That's right. Yeah. The Metro Centre. Yeah.
The Metro Centre. Yeah.
The Metro Centre.
Yeah. So I mean, basically, I'll give a little bit of explanation about Yurchak and hypernormalization. He was an anthropology professor. He was born in Leningrad, and he went off to UC Berkeley. He did this book called "Everything Was Forever Until It Was No More: The Last Soviet Generation" in 2006, and it described, how everybody knew the system was failing, but they couldn't imagine any alternative. And he says over time, the mass delusion becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Everyone accepts it as the new normal, and rather than pretend, they go into this state of hypernormalization. And hypernormalization has very specific characteristics, and I'll just run through briefly what they are. Number one, there is paradoxical stability and decay. And he argues that what was happening in the late Soviet Union was they maintained the appearances of stability and permanence, a bit like our body of Lenin. Everything was forever, despite the fact it was obviously collapsing, and all the stability was completely performative. And part of it was using things like ritualized language and behavior, even as it was obviously falling apart. I mean, an example today is when people talk about things like British values as a kind of reflex celebration, of being British versus the UK reality that you see. The second characteristic he talks about is there's a detachment from meaning. He talks about how the people in the Soviet Union, they participated in rituals like speeches and propaganda without believing in the content. So the language becomes hypernormalized. It's repetitive, it's hollow. There's a shared understanding, though, that the system's ideology is more symbolic than it is real. And so in a British sense today, we would have an example of that ritualized language. We would say diversity is our strength, or things like they died so you can vote. These kind of empty nostrums. Another characteristic he describes is normalization of the abnormal. And this is how all the kind of dysfunctional parts of life in the Soviet Union, like the shortages, the corruption, all the contradictions of ideology, these were just accepted as normal. And it dulled people's critical awareness. So it made the decline more imperceptible over time. And today, for instance, again, another example in the present moment would be things like the anarcho-tyranny that we see. Terrorism and rape are all part and parcel of life. It's when you begin to normalize these dysfunctions. Another characteristic he talks about is people leading dual lives and creative adaptation. So they outwardly conform to the norms of the Soviet society, but privately they pursue these alternative identities and cultures and meanings through things like art and humor, or samizdat, underground publications, networks. And it allows them to survive with a bit of freedom and agency in a stagnant system. The analogy with today for us is things like this: digital parasociality, having multiple lifestyle choices. Even the dissident right, dare I say it, the last factor he identifies,
which never existed, by the way. Dissident right does not exist. But anyway, let's carry on.
Yeah. And the last thing he says is the characteristic is the collapse is a sudden shock. He talks about how when the Soviet Union ended officially in 1991, it was unexpected because the hypernormalization masks how fragile it is. And so when it unraveled, it did so really abruptly because everyone was caught off guard. It's in a sort of minor key, we see it in things like, we saw Brexit as a kind of shock in a similar way. It's a collapse of consensus politics, or you have, medical emergencies, and they're a collapse of the previously understood parameters of your individual sovereignty and your social relations. Things like the channel crossings, the volume and the speed of the demographic change is a shock, because you recognize it's a naked expression of government will, despite the fact it's seeming completely contradictory. And so, his central idea is that hypernormalization is a state where reality is completely distorted by the official narrative, but you cease to question it at that point, and you can't imagine alternatives. I mean, it very much ties in with the stuff I've talked about before, where Adam Curtis is influenced by people like Mark Fisher, talks about capitalist realism via Frederick Jameson, American intellectual, the idea that it's easier to imagine an end to the world than an end to capitalism. I think Slavoj Žižek may have said it as well. And so you end with this air of unreality. And I'll end, there's a last bit that Curtis talked about in an interview. He said, Donald Trump is not something new. He's the final pantomime product of the US government, where the powerful are abandoning any pretense of common inclusive ideals and instead using their positions to settle scores, reward loyalty, and hollow out institutions for personal or political gain. He says, Trump's US is just like Yeltsin in Russia in the 90s. promising a new kind of democracy, but in reality, allowing the oligarchs to loot and distort the society.
I, Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States. That I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
The new President of America had a new vision of the world. It wasn't the harsh realism of Henry Kissinger any longer.
Why has he got Donald Trump as one of his special service guys?
I thought it looks like him. Yeah, it's not him, but it looks like him, doesn't it?
I knew Trump was immortal.
Do you know that rapper Killer Mike has just ruined? Every time I see Reagan now, I just think of those couple of lines. You know, Ronald Reagan was an actor, not at all a factor, just a real puppet of the country's real masters. It's such a brilliant summation of Ronald Reagan. Anyway, let's carry on.
It was different. It was a simple moral crusade, where America had a special destiny to fight evil and to make the world a better place.
The places and the periods in which man has known freedom are few and far between, just scattered moments on the span of time. And most of those moments have been ours. The American people have a genius for great and unselfish deeds. Into the hands of America, God has placed the destiny of an afflicted mankind. God bless America.
Pause. Can I just say, no one can blame me for the pauses. That's my first one at 1 hour 45, okay, for the record. And I only want to say, although Curtis is saying that Reagan went on a simplistic moral crusade, the level of discourse in that tiny clip was still much higher than you hear now. Or maybe discourse is the wrong word, just that monologue, even from Reagan, even Reagan the actor, even in this period of sort of, alleged decline, isn't that still a much higher level, the way he was speaking there and the imagery? I thought so anyway.
It was sort of unembarrassed exceptionalism, wasn't it? It was
well, yes.
Yeah.
There was that as well, but even the language was somewhat poetic and quite high level.
Yeah.
I mean, you see that watching British stuff from 80s, 70s, the level of debate, even, things have probably degenerated quite badly by then, but the level of debate in the 70s at least was amazing compared to now. Amazing. Like, for intellectuals,
Yeah.
Sorry.
I did a stream on Enoch Powell's other immigration speech from 1981, and, Powell just going at it in the Commons is nothing comparable today.
Honestly, it's got to the point where I see clips of Diane Abbott and Michael Portillo from 10 years ago and think even from there we've declined.
You started posting about the golden era of like the Bush, Condoleezza Rice kind of Colin Powell.
Ridiculous.
I mean, say what you like about Diane Abbott, but at least she knows who Mao Zedong is,
Yeah, she may say it is more good than harm on balance, but by gosh, she knows who he is.
But this crusade was going to lead Reagan to come face to face with Henry Kissinger's legacy. And above all, the vengeful fury of President Assad of Syria. Israel was now determined to finally destroy the power of the Palestinians. And in 1982, they sent a massive army to encircle the Palestinian camps in the Lebanon.
Do you know how...
Sorry, this can't be right. I thought that history began on October the 7th, 2023. What? This implies that there was a pre-existing context.
Can I ask a question? Why is Lebanon called the Lebanon?
Don't know.
And there's a number of countries around there where they do that. Do they also call it the Yemen as well?
I have heard it called the Yemen, Yemen,
the
Transjordan is another one.
Maybe we should bring that back and call other countries the. Has there ever been the Great Britain? Or is it just
the United Kingdom, the UK? Ukraine obviously is called the Ukraine.
The Ukraine,
yeah. Or the Ukraine, as Laurence Olivier said it in The World at War. Yeah, the Ukraine.
Well, what's the deal with that? I don't. Anyway, so.
Is it because it was just a region of a larger polity before?
Like the Levant as well.
Yeah, that's a geographical area, right?
Yeah, like the Sahel. Yeah.
Is it that these were historically geographical areas that have become countries, nation states since? So that's like a holdover.
Maybe they just said "the" before instead of saying "OG." You know, it's OG Lebanon, the Lebanon.
I mean, the Congo as well is another one.
That's true. Good point.
Because the Congo is just named after the Congo River, so maybe that explains that one. But the rest, I don't know. I'll do a Grok search for you. There we go.
How strong the Israelis are. Do you know how many tanks they have outside Beirut? Do you know how strong they are?
يعني بيقول انه احنا بنعرف انه الاسرائيليين اقوياء فهل هذا بيأثر علينا؟ اسرائيل وامريكا وكل دول العالم ما بتأثر.
That fellow with a moustache looks like he's from a kind of Boston Union line or something. What's he doing there? It's just like it doesn't look like the rest of them. Anyway,
can I just say that caption there sounds like AA's Twitter account. We're not scared of it. So, never mind. Just you're always on about Israel, but never mind.
علينا طول ما سلاحنا بإيدنا ولا أي دولة في العالم تقدر تحاربنا. That means we are not ready to surrender. طول ما هو الشعب رافع راسه والشعب معنا ما حدا بيقدرنا.
طلع شاب يانج لسه بيبل اولاد صغار على الحرب.
Dash into this building here because the PLO guys will expect that sooner or later there will be a huge explosion. There have been several of these in the last few minutes. As you can see, there's enormous damage in all the buildings around here.
This, by the way, is something John Simpson has been talking about, that Israel haven't allowed reporters to go down to Gaza. So we're not getting this on the ground. Like, there are no reporters there. I think the only journalist who's gone there is Douglas Murray. You know, so it's kind of like, so you don't get, there's no like Kate Adie in Gaza.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, have you even been? Well, no, I'm not allowed.
Have you even been? Yeah, exactly.
Simpson's in this in a minute, isn't it, as well?
Is there also not, like, I have not seen reports like this from Ukraine either. What happened to the roving war reporter?
Oh, there was that, what's his name? Lancaster, wasn't it?
Patrick.
In the early stage. Patrick Lancaster, was it?
Yeah. He's still doing it, yeah. His YouTube channel. I don't watch it, but his YouTube channel still reporting from the fighting, yeah.
I actually get updates because we've got a lad in our five-a-side football team from there because he's had to come over. He didn't want to come over, but his wife and kid, he basically said his marriage was going to end unless he came over because they've had to come over. So I get updates, but only from him. So yeah, I've noticed that as well.
I was in the gym locker the other night, and there was this guy, big muscle guy, kind of Essex accent, and he couldn't find like you've got all the different lockers. He forgot the number of his locker, and they all look the same. So he was like, "Oh, blah, which one was it?" And he was like, "Hey, mate, Ukraine, come over here. Which locker was it?" And he was like, "Yeah." To be fair, Ukraine did know where it was. I just found it funny that the guy's nickname is literally just Ukraine.
It's like Russian. We had because I grew up in the little village in the north with no one. We had one Geordie guy. He was called Geordie, and we had one. I'm sorry to say this, but we had one black guy in the whole village, and he was called Black Brian. Different times. Are you allowed to say that on YouTube? I don't know.
Black Brian.
In my town.
I used to have a joke about it.
I live in not even a small town, but there was Black Mike. Yeah, everyone just knew this guy, Black Mike.
Right.
I used to have a joke on instead. I'm trying to remember. It was something like we also had Butcher Frank because he was a butcher, and Traitor Pete because he was friends with Black Brian. People love that joke, but it was a sort of borderline. Can you do that on stage? I think I had to phase it out. Anyway, sorry.
They did a lot of that in Wales as well. There was like Die Chips, the owner of the fish and chip shop. His name was Die Chips and things like that.
Die the butcher, Die the meat.
Yeah, they're all called Die. They're all called Die.
Quick.
2 months later, thousands of Palestinian refugees were massacred in the camps. It horrified the world. But what was even more shocking was that Israel had allowed it to happen. Its troops had stood by and watched as a Christian Lebanese faction murdered the Palestinians.
This was the first of the massacres we discussed.
Isn't that John Simpson?
That's what I said. John Simpson's in it in a minute, and there he is. Isn't that, by the way, I know Curtis loves a dead body, but isn't that a bit weird? You're just like, I'm in front of, this is the BBC, I'm in front of some dead bodies.
Well, they wouldn't do it now. I mean, that's the thing. They wouldn't. That's the Sabra and Shatila massacre in 1982. Between 1,300, 3,500 people died.
I was going to ask, was that massacre, was it primarily because the Palestinians being in Lebanon was destabilizing Lebanon, or why did they massacre thousands of people?
I'm not going to go into it. It's too complicated. I messed up the thing last week about the village, but it was obviously there was a lot of Palestinians after the war who fled from Israel, moved to Palestine, about 100,000 of them, and round about this time the population grew to about 230,000 odd. And
Lebanon's a small place, isn't it?
Yeah.
Lebanon's a small country. It's already got its own problems.
Horace, the Lebanon.
The Lebanon.
Sorry, call it by its name.
I looked it up, by the way. Apparently, that's just like a borrowed from the French, when it was their possession, called it Le Liban. I'm not sure why.
Right.
The English just took that name and made it.
I'll just correct my figures there. The actual number of Palestinians at that time was about 375,000 in 1982. But basically, they were starting to do raids on Israel, and people were being killed. So the Israelis went in.
This is a constant thing. Wherever the PLO, I assume it was the PLO, wherever they based themselves, they just became a massive problem for that country. I think I said this last week. There was this time in Lebanon, before this in Jordan. There was also a time in Tunisia. And just wherever they base themselves, they start wars, basically. And I'm talking about the PLO. I'm not blaming the general Palestinian population, refugees and stuff. But
this is all mixed in with the civil war in Lebanon as well. So it's a great big mess of sort of Shias and Christian phalangist militias and all this sort of stuff.
For anyone watching who doesn't know, Lebanon's got the most bizarre arrangement. Like their president is like their head of state. I don't know if it's president is appointed by Saudi. Whereas their leader has to be from some community, and the parliament has to be partly from this community and partly from that one. And they've got 10 different religions to juggle. They've also got Hezbollah, which is like an arm of Iran operating based there, and they kind of partly control the country. But then also, obviously, Hezbollah is no friend of Saudi Arabia, so there's all sorts of and so Israel has always got reasons to hit out at Lebanon, and then Syria would try and control Lebanon as well. It's like a complete, it's just disastrous.
Discovered yesterday. Now, 24 hours later, the stench here is appalling. But the effects on the Israelis of what their Christian allies did here and in dozens of other places around this camp are going to be immense. There's always been a risk of such massacres if Christian militiamen were allowed to come into Palestinian camps. And the Israelis seem to have done nothing to prevent them coming into this one.
You can see, watching that, why John Simpson now has such strong feelings. Because if you'd been there and witnessed that, you can kind of see why he's kind of emotionally invested. Kind of interesting.
In the face of the horror and the growing chaos, President Reagan was forced to act. He announced that American Marines would come to Beirut to lead a peacekeeping force. Reagan insisted that the troops were neutral, but President Assad was convinced that there was another reality. He saw the troops as part of the growing conspiracy between America and Israel to divide the Middle East into factions and destroy the power of the Arabs. Assad decided to get the Americans out of the Middle East. And to do this, he made an alliance with the new revolutionary force of Ayatollah Khomeini's Iran. And what Khomeini could bring to Assad was an extraordinary new weapon that he had just created. It was called the poor man's atomic bomb.
Definitely think the old Ayatollah had more swagger about him than the new one.
Oh,
than the one who, he was more stylish, wasn't he?
The Sean Connery Ayatollah.
better dictator chic than Khamenei, in my opinion, who's always been this kind of almost like bureaucratic figure in a way. You know, doesn't
the
have the
Sean
swag.
Connery Ayatollah.
Yeah, because he's got those dark eyebrows and the grey beard.
I mean, come on, if you made a film, you'd cast Sean Connery as the Ayatollah.
Totally, yeah.
Or
Yeah,
if you made a film about Sean Connery, you'd cast Connery.
You could have, yeah.
Ayatollah Khomeini had come to power 2 years before as the leader of the Iranian Revolution. But his hold on power...
Whenever I see these guys, I always just think it's like, it'd be such a shame if they couldn't do force lightning. I always think that about the Pope as well. Whenever I see the Pope, it's like, what's the point? Unless you can do lightning, what's the point?
Exactly.
You know.
By the way, this is you reacting to Stalin. Your soul kind and pure.
Power was precarious. And Khomeini had developed a new idea of how to fight his enemies and defend the revolution. Khomeini told his followers that they could destroy themselves in order to save the revolution, providing that in the process they killed as many enemies around them as possible. This was completely new, because the Quran specifically prohibited suicide. In the past, you became a martyr on the battlefield because God chose the time and place of your death. But Khomeini changed this. He did it by going back to one of the central rituals of Shia Islam. Every year, Shiites march in a procession, mourning the sacrifice of their founder, Hussein. As they do, they whip themselves, symbolically reenacting Hussein's suffering. Khomeini said,
Have you ever seen the footage of where some of them get a bit carried away and they're like lashing their own back and it's bleeding and stuff?
Horrible.
Kind of scary, weird. Weird.
There's been like Christians who've done that as well, right? Through like
flagellants.
I always remember reading The Monk, Shadoni the Monk by in Anne Radcliffe's The Italian. Ever read that novel? He's a particularly austere monk who is a little bit hardcore in the self-flagellation states as well. So.
Oh, yeah.
The ultimate act of penitence was not just to whip yourself, but to kill yourself, providing it was for the greater good of the revolution.
In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, good afternoon. An Iraqi Soviet-made MiG-23 was shot down by the Air Force jet fighters of the Islamic Republic over the northwestern Iranian border region.
It's a bit like watching BBC News now, isn't it?
It is.
Why is it in English? Why is she talking in English?
Could be a foreign-oriented service, like, you know, you had Radio Moscow and all the stuff. You know, you want to tell the rest of the world.
They should start BBC with an announcement like that. In the name of diversity, which is our strength. Good afternoon, or something like that.
In the name of Keir the Merciful.
I think Corbyn was a guest on this channel. I think he was a regular on IR.
Galloway, Ken Livingstone, all of them. Yeah.
Of Marivon at 10:08 hours local time Saturday, said the Joint Staff Command's communique numbered 1710.
Khomeini had mobilized this force when the country was attacked by Iraq. Iran faced almost certain defeat.
That newscaster is getting a lot of woods in the chat. What the hell?
There you go.
Oh, she's better than that stand up for racism woman from yesterday. Bloody hell! I'd ban people for saying wood for that.
Because Iraq had far superior.
Come on, Horace, sorry.
Who was this stand up to racism woman? Was that on your stream yesterday?
Yeah, her name's
Sabi Dalu.
Yeah. I mean, she was on LBC, and people were like, "Yeah, maybe after 20 pints." I mean, come on. So I banned. I mean, come on, that is unacceptable. So that's kind of
after 20 pints, she just report you for assaulting her, wouldn't she?
Weapons, many of them supplied by America. So the revolutionaries took tens of thousands of young boys out of schools, put them on buses, and sent them to the front line. Their job was to walk through the enemy's minefields, deliberately blowing themselves up in order to open gaps that would allow the Iranian army to pass through unharmed. It was organised suicide on a vast scale. This human sacrifice was commemorated.
Anyone else reminded of Monty Python, like Brian? It's the Suicide Squad.
Yeah. Well, they actually, I think they cut a lot of that stuff from the film actually, because that was Otto and the Suicide Squad, who had a sort of a symbol that was curiously close to a mid-20th century symbol on his helmet. It was a Star of David with little extra bits on to make it look like a swastika. Yeah.
In giant cemeteries across the country, fountains flowing with blood-red water glorified this new kind of martyrdom.
Fucking hell.
This all goes back to, I mean, it's a little bit controversial, this stuff, but this is, the 1980 to 88 Iran-Iraq war. And this stems from an incident in 1980. There was a battle in an Iranian port called Khorramshahr, and it was near the border with Iraq. And essentially, the Iraqis were coming in, and the Iranians were losing the battle. And they'd taken the canal, and they were about to take this strategic port. And there was this young lad who happened to be there called Mohammed Hossein Famida. He was only 13, and there were some Iraqi soldiers and tanks coming in, and they were smashing everybody to bits. There's an interesting book called The Price of Paradise by Ian Overton, and an article in GQ that relates some of this stuff, which I'll post later. But essentially, this young teenage lad saw the Iraqis coming, and there were sort of dead soldiers lying all around the place. So he grabbed a grenade from one of the soldiers, pulled the pin, and he ran towards the nearest Iraqi tank, dived underneath it, and blew it up. And he became a revered figure, apparently. It was pictures of him all over Iran. And he became an icon himself, and an inspiration for this campaign of essentially turning young teenage boys into suicide soldiers.
Crazy. You see, I mean, it's probably stuff like this is what, sometimes I argue with my dad, is that my dad's views on religion are pretty much like Reddit tier. Like, he's just kind of, he won't have any even talk of it. Like, he just shut, but it's probably stuff like this. He probably remembers living through this era and thinking these guys are insane. I'm not going to have anything to do with it.
I would say talk to him about it, because I noticed some conversations online about this. There were some Iranians saying, no, bullshit, never happened. It's a lie. It's propaganda. Didn't happen. These guys were given a little headband which said Sa Allah on it, the warriors of God. And they were given a little plastic key, which was symbolic of the key that will take them into heaven once they're killed, to wear around their neck.
Bloody hell.
And
this is dark. This is dark, though, isn't it? This is pretty dark.
Yeah.
They had to have a blood red fountain.
They would
in
have
honor
shirts
of, suiciding. Come on.
They'd have shirts on with slogans that would say, "I have the special permission of the Imam to enter heaven," because of the forbidding of suicide. And it's when you read some of the articles about it, there's one correspondent who's talking to an Iranian officer, and he says, well, he just shrugs and says, we just don't have any tanks. So.
And it was this new idea of an unstoppable human weapon that President Assad took from Khomeini and brought to the West for the first time. But as it travelled, it would mutate into something even more deadly. Instead of just killing yourself, you would take explosives with you into the heart of the enemy, and then blow yourself up, taking dozens or even hundreds along with you.
One thing I have to say about Iranian strategy in the region that has been noted when I see some of the debates online and things, they have had a long history of getting other people to do it. Like, they espouse all of this, and there's well, who's the guys doing it? Oh yes, they're these Syrian guys over here, or it's Hezbollah in Lebanon or something. They've been quite good at getting proxy forces to do it, rather than getting Iranian lads to do it. I mean, obviously, we saw some of that for some of those were Iranians, but over time they've kind of outsourced a lot of this stuff, which I think in the region rubs quite a few of the Arab nations up the wrong way. So they're like, oh well, they're always getting us to do it type thing. So it's kind of I see that as a talking point on occasion. So.
It would become known as suicide bombing. In October 1983, 2 suicide bombers drove trucks into the US Marine barracks in Beirut.
It was seeing something move that took me out of my trance. And then I recognized, oh yes, Marines were in that building. A lot of Marines were in that building. And that's when I ran down, and it was a black Marine. He looked white. The dust, it just covered him.
The massive explosions killed 241 Americans. The bombers were members of a new militant group that no one had heard of. They called themselves Hezbollah, and although many of them were Iranian, they were very much under the control of Syria and the Syrian intelligence agencies. President Assad was using them as his proxies to attack America.
Whoever carried out yesterday's bombings, Shia Muslim fanatics, devotees of the Ayatollah Khomeini, or whatever, it is Syria who profits politically. The most significant fact is that the dissidents live and work with Syrian protection. So it is to Syria, rather than to the dissident group's guiding light, Ayatollah Khomeini of Iran, that we must look for an explanation of the group's activities. Destabilization is Syria's Middle Eastern way of reminding the world that Syria must not be left out of plans for the future of the area.
Didn't have to work too hard to make him look like the Bond villain. He's always very good at finding like the perfect Bond villain shot, isn't he?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this is the sort of Curtis is using this as a sort of another example of a kind of hypernormalization that goes on, because what he does is Assad and via Iran, they give suicide bombing this sort of transcendent political motivation that's stronger than simply the modes of hard power of disciplining troops and sending them into battle. It's like if anybody remembers The Godfather Part 2, when Michael Corleone's off to Cuba to sort of deal with the casinos because Castro is about to come in, and he sees the incident in the street where these police guys stop these dissidents, and then this chap rushes out of the crowd with a grenade and runs to the police car and blows himself up in the police car. And Michael Corleone says, "You're not going to defeat that. This is kind of America looking at itself with Vietnam at the same time. You're not going to defeat these people who are driven by this personal principle of salvation and a true cause." But what happens is the Americans leave. The hard power acquiesces because it sees it as this sort of strategy, this psychological strategy. It can't really defeat. Like it had with Vietnam. It's probably a bit shy of going into this war where there's this sort of deranged commitment. And what you get in sort of cultural theory terms, it's what you'd call a hyperstitional belief. Superstitions are the idea of superstition is thoughts in your head, but they're not really real in the real world. And hyperstition, this is a kind of Nick Land, Mark Fisher thing. The hyperstitional idea is that you have a collective belief in something which is real. It creates a new reality. And that's the nature of the hypernormalization here. It's this sort of fake reality, but you will actually have power through destroying yourself. And this is the very powerful idea that Curtis talks about in The Power of Nightmares, that influences these, Salafist Islamists to destroy themselves and America in the process.
Now, chaps, we're reaching the 40-minute mark here. Shall we try to get to a natural point to call it?
It's the next chapter of this one's going to start in a minute. Yeah, so it's really
probably
going to
like a natural point to wrap up again. Fun as it's been, very educational today. Very educational.
Yeah.
There are no words that can express our sorrow and grief over the loss of those splendid young men and the injury to so many others. But these deeds make so evident the bestial nature of those who would assume power if they could have their way and drive us out of that area.
But despite his words, within 4 months, President Reagan withdrew all the American troops from the Lebanon. The Secretary of State, George Shultz, explained, "We became paralyzed by the complexity that we faced," he said. So the Americans turned and left. For President Assad, it was an extraordinary achievement.
There you go. Cheeky little Assad there.
Dick Dastardly and Muttley shot of him.
There you go.
That's also like a key moment, it seems, when American policy became, as some would say, fake and gay all the way down.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They give up with the real battle, and this. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah. It's like one of the first memes.
He was the only Arab leader to have defeated the Americans and forced them to leave the Middle East. He had done it by using the new force of suicide bombing. A force that, once unleashed, was going to spread with unstoppable power. But at this point, both Assad and the Iranians thought that they could control it.
But he had one fatal weakness: sending his son to be a dentist in London. Basically, he failed to inculcate his son with the same lion spirit.
Was he an optician?
An optician. That was it. An optician.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
I keep thinking he's a dentist as well for some reason. Yeah.
And what gave it this extraordinary power was that it held out the dream of transcending the corruptions of the world and entering a new and better realm.
One should defend the realm of Islam and Muslims against heretics and invaders. And to fulfill this duty, one should even sacrifice one's life. We believe that martyrs can overlook our deeds from the other world. It means that after death, the martyr lives and can still witness this world.
Pause a second. So that was a particularly gruesome bit of footage, wasn't it? Was that person like ragged on there? Were they like? Is that half a person or something? Or was that their clothes? I couldn't see it. It looked like maybe their bowels were all cut off.
Particularly morbid. This episode's particularly morbid, I would say.
There you go.
This is the next chapter.
Yeah, there it is. So remember, 39. So just around 40. Another 20 minutes achieved.
Yeah. The interesting thing about that ending there, that form of hypernormalization, this idea of going to transcendent warfare, as a means of dealing, with the hard power of America. The piece of music he's playing there is a piece, because I've noticed he's starting to underline sections with the title of the piece, and the concept of the piece itself actually reflects on what he's saying. There's a piece that he's playing there called the Ganzfeld effect. And a Ganzfeld effect is an interesting phenomenon where you can make yourself hallucinate into all sorts of new reality. You essentially, what you do is you do sensory deprivation. You cover your eyes and expose them, to like a source of white light that comes through, if you imagine cutting a couple of ping pong balls in half, putting them over your eyes, then having a white light shine in from behind, it becomes like a uniform visual field. And then you put on headphones and play white noise. And apparently most people can only stand about 30 minutes of it. But what happens is the brain is sort of tricked because you're giving it uniform stimulation, visually and orally. But the brain has a predictive coding mechanism. So it tries to restabilize your perceptions. And what it tends to then do is make you hallucinate because it's lost external data that's coming in. And it makes you go into your subconscious, your anxieties, fears, and so on. And a lot of people, you can see videos of people trying this out on YouTube, but apparently it's not good to do it for very long, especially if you have mental health conditions or particularly anxious. But you will start to see things.
When was that Aphex Twin, that track?
That's another Pie Corner audio track. But I just looked up the actual effect. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, just the one when Assad was shaking his fist of victory. That was Aphex Twin, wasn't it? That was from Selected Ambient Works 2.
Could well have been. I couldn't identify it myself, but yeah, it's very likely. Yeah.
I listened to all of Aphex Twin when I was at uni. I was
Oh,
obsessed.
Yeah.
My favourite Aphex Twin track is that piano track. I forget what it's called now. There's a piano track they do. Which,
I used to play that years ago on the piano.
Oh,
yeah.
If it's the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I mean, there's only.
The opening track from the album Drux, I think.
That's it. Avril 14th. That's that. Yeah. Just a few super chats. So we did that first one. Can't wait to watch the next 4 minutes of Hypernormalization. Gaz says, thanks in advance. Ludwig von Lammy says, academic agent, content creator on the great scale, friend of the working man and lover of stylish hats, who wins an intellectual bloodsport battle royale between Tanky AA, Carlylean AA, Evolian AA, Misesian AA, Sowell AA, and Machiavellian AA. Well, I mean, the Misesians would be out due to the NAP, the non-aggression principle. So Sowell and Mises lose on account of being non-aggression principle. You can't win a defensive war, and you have to go on offense. So it has to be between the other three or the other four. I would suggest probably the Machiavellian one for obvious reasons. Strategy, tactics, Tankier would probably like run out of resources or cause a famine or something like that. So it has to be the Machiavellian one, I would say. All right. Elephant says, regarding Fuentes and Carl, wife guys are certified mooks. Who remembers the painter due to his devotion to Eva Braun? Dan Qua.
They didn't get married, though.
Well, they left it to the last minute to get married, but I mean, that's just out of our earlier.
Blummin should have, and they should have had 3 kids. All right, I'm being a proper trad dad.
See, he knew.
Dan Qua 111 says, if there's a redemption for Robin Williams, it's his turn on Louis C.K.'s comedy series. It's a good episode and worth a watch.
Yeah, it was good.
Was Robin Williams a good stand-up?
I think it's quite good.
He was. I can give you what the sort of lore on it is. I haven't really watched much of it. I've watched bits of it, but he was considered incredible in terms of performance and, as you expect, sort of act outs and impressions and so on.
Improv, yeah.
But what he would do, he would come on and he would do the really annoying thing that acts would do in America, particularly. They come on and bump you, so they come on you to get some stage time. They then do an hour, and then you're bumped down the list, and you either don't get on or you get on at 1 a.m. or whatever. And he would also steal people's material. And he would sometimes even pay them and apologize and things like that, because he would sort of get in these zones and he'd say, I've just realized that was your bit, sort of thing. So he was one of those kind of guys, a kind of monster, kind of, you have to respect the talent, but the talent kind of absorbs everything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you guys have ever watched the Larry Sanders show, but he's on that in one episode, and it's really funny.
I love Larry Sanders. I watched the whole thing. I grew up watching it, and I got all the DVD, the entire collection. Yeah, it's so good.
The episode where Robin Williams is in it, and you see a little bit of him when he's under stress. It's really funny.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Larry Sanders not real guy, right?
Gary Shandling's the real guy.
Yeah, but the man Larry Sanders is a character.
Yeah, Gary Shandling's playing Larry Sanders. Yeah,
and it was very confusing to me because obviously in Seinfeld, Jerry Seinfeld is a real guy called Seinfeld, and so I could never. Yeah, it took me. I mean, don't forget you couldn't just look things up on the internet back in the day. So
you are watching a fictional version of Seinfeld there, though. Right?
Yeah, and what's even more confusing is he had the It's Gary Shandling show where it was Gary Shandling playing Gary Shandling. Then Shandling says, "Right, I'm now going to play Larry Sanders," and then all the people that come on are playing versions of themselves. So Jim Carrey's playing like a dickhead version of himself. Seinfeld's playing a version of himself on Larry Sanders, etc.
And It's Gary Shandling's show also broke the fourth wall all the time as well.
Yeah,
to make it even more confusing.
The last episode of Larry Sanders is one of the greatest things of all time. It's unbelievably good.
Yeah, I would say to everyone, it's worth watching all 6 or so series of it. I mean, the last episode with Jim Carrey is so funny. I don't even like Jim Carrey. It's really funny on that, though.
And they've got Norm Macdonald on it. It's hilarious. It's incredible. Yeah, it starts off, if you watch the 1 and 2 and early seasons, you won't like laugh so much because the humor will be slightly dated or whatever. But it's worth watching the whole, not just for the humor. It basically created The Office as well, which Ricky Gervais admitted.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I have to give it a watch. I just remember it being on. It was like Channel 4 or something. But obviously in Wales, anything that was on at like 9 p.m. Channel 4 would be on at like 1 a.m. something. So
dubbed in Welsh.
It was on very late in England as well. Oh, yeah, it was on very late.
You'd have to, but often I was waiting for WCW wrestling to come on at 2 a.m. or whatever. So I'd be waiting, and I watched a lot of weird stuff. Waiting for wrestling to come on. But anyway,
like Noisy Mothers.
I mean, it would be like anything after Eurotrash. There was some weird stuff on TV. I always remember there was this chef show where they would like go into trail, like they were like students basically, but they'd like go and like they try to make a souffle and it would go terribly wrong. That was like a 10-minute thing. They'd stick on at like 12:30, half midnight, something like that. But Larry Sanders was on in that sort of slot. It would be like, what was that one I did in the Ashes of Civilization? With the guy in the Oilers jacket. What was that thing called? Nightlife. Like the guy just going and looking around like fish and chip shops, and you go and order a pizza type thing. That was on in that weird late night slot as well. But yeah, Get Stuff. That was the cooking one. The guy in the Oilers jacket was called Night Vision, Night Line, something like that. But anyway,
cheap TV.
Yeah, I mean, Prisoner Cell Block H. I was a big fan of that, of course. That was on in that
Noisy Mothers was on in the middle of the night, like 1 a.m, 2 a.m. That was the only rock and metal program on TV. If you were a metaler, that was the only one.
Eyes That Watch says, presume you're getting paid for the Coinbase shill. No, the fat chance. American Anglo says, British humour since Monty Python is pure subversive anti-white propaganda. I, as an Englishman, prefer US comedy because making fun of yourself weakens you.
I'm not sure that's true. I mean, the Office was. What about The Office, where he's sort of pointing out Mandela was a terrorist and stuff? And I don't know. I'm not sure.
That's good. That bit. That's.
I'm a fan. I'm a fan of British comedy up until about 10 years ago, and even then, I still like Limmy. I like Limmy's good, So have you ever met Limmy? Have you ever met Limmy, Nick?
No, I haven't actually. But yeah, he is good, and I have to acknowledge. Yeah, the Office is a masterpiece. The English Office. I think everyone has to acknowledge that. So
I'll still watch that now. I'll happily watch all of that through again now. It's
brilliant show.
Brilliant.
I got mocked once because I insisted that the acting in The Office is as good as the acting in The Godfather. It sounds ridiculous, but that sounds ridiculous, right?
What they tried to do, they did superbly.
Dawn from The Office, her performance as Dawn is as good as Diane Keaton or whatever.
Yeah, Finchy's very good. No, you're absolutely right. I immediately agree.
Yeah, correct opinions. Laws of Lycurgus says, in the Magna Carta, any debt owed to a certain foreigner upon death, the debt was forgiven. These days, England has an eternal debt yoke it cannot pay. Pietro says, at 1 hour 20, for today we've seen a review of 0.74%, that is 1 minute and 14 seconds of the documentary Lamau. Lamau. Anon says, any chance that Chris Gard made a longer version of the intro? Such a banger. I don't really see. The only thing I see of Chris Gard these days is that occasionally he sticks up a cigar he's smoking. I don't really see it much anymore. He's kind of just roofing and smoking cigars now.
Can I just reply to the last? Oh, sorry, you're not finished.
Yeah, go on.
I just want to reply to the last comment. Britain can get out from under its debt. They choose to overspend. We covered this last week when talking about hypernormalization. It's a choice. They choose to spend way more than they tax, so that's why the debt and the deficit and so on. It's not they can't. It's a choice.
I still think Peep Show is a good show as well.
It's excellent.
There's so many moments of that I remember. I always remember Johnson. Right, Johnson. I'm going to change the gears for you.
Yeah, he was good.
But I remember that scene, like Mark, admit it. Would you stick on that ass? he's like, yes. I don't know. I think that was good comedy.
The writer of that, of course, wrote Succession, which I don't know if people like it, but it's one of the great. It's sort of separating yourself from politics and things for a second. It's just one of the greatest written dramas probably ever, and it is kind of, and you can. It is about a right wing network and so on. So you can kind of. It's not completely like normie woke stuff. It's very clever. I think Jesse Armstrong, he is. I know it's a bit of a normie thing to say. He's a genius, and Peep Show and Succession are incredibly well written.
Nick, did you think the 4th season of it was a bit disappointing? Because I did.
Yeah, it picks up later. The first season is basically perfect. The second season is very strong. The third one, it goes a bit wrong because they're in COVID and they have to keep staying in the same room. There's all these restrictions on filming. And then the fourth one picks up towards the end. The problem they have is they only have one plot. They have literally one plot the entire thing, which is, we want to take over our dad's company, but what if we don't get to? Or what I want to, but I want to. That's the whole plot the whole time. Yeah. And it works incredibly for first season, but it's very strong overall. Once you've watched Succession, I keep sort of apologizing for this being a normie opinion, but once you've watched it, the writing's so good, or you can almost watch nothing else. Everything else is pedestrian because he's got the comedic writing from Peep Show, and he's got the drama as well.
This is it. It makes other things seem not worth watching because it is excellent.
I'm so glad you agree with me. See, people who haven't watched it, I claim are not.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, see,
it's a big
I claim
success,
you're barely a person.
Everyone I mentioned it to hasn't watched it, even though it was a huge hit.
Simon Evans hasn't watched it.
People don't watch TV anymore. Nobody watches TV. The last thing I watched on TV was AC12. Now we're cooking with diesel. I mean, that was about 5 years ago.
No. One of my mates watched it on. Yeah. One of my mates watched it on TV, told me about it, and then I obtained it by other means. Yeah.
It's unbelievably good. And I have this problem, Horace. My friend Simon Evans, he's a total genius, but I was like, you haven't watched the session. I told him you're barely a person. And I stand by that.
Speaking of comedy, did you see that one of the lads from the In-Betweeners cut he got political and that went viral? Did you see that? He was like moaning that the country's going to shit and
someone tried to debunk him, didn't they? He was talking about council tax and how it doesn't go towards any of these services. And someone tried to debunk him and said, well, that's not what council tax is for. But whether it was right or not, technically, intuitively, he absolutely nailed the feeling of where's my money going.
I even like Fresh Meat. Did you watch that show? It kind of spoke to me. I was an English lecturer at the time. And I was like, this is a show about, I kind of recognized all the things that went on, using like some of the sleazy aspects as well. Anyway, Anon says, Captain Smith says, I rewatched Hypernormalization recently. I liked it when it came out. Now I see it as a very scattered BBC propaganda piece with some good insights. I trust Simon to fact check anything Curtis gets wrong.
Shots fired.
Gaz says, would James O'Brien turn his skills to the right under the right regime? I don't know about that. Do you think he would?
Yeah, because he shills for Starmer, and Starmer is not exactly seen as a lefty by lefties, is he? He's seen as a total, as we see from Miss Sultana having a whole new party and calling Labour the party of a G word. I don't know if we can say on YouTube, but he shills for Starmer, which doesn't make him like a man of the left. It just makes him a man of the regime.
He's like a centrist dad, basically, is the target audience of James O'Brien, isn't it? Centrist dad.
Yeah. And what is a centrist dad if not someone absolutely obsessed with conformity?
If Frankie Boyle can do it, James O'Brien can do it.
Principled Uncertainty says, no idea when this will be read out, but thanks for the Curtis content. One of maybe 6 good things left.
On Earth.
On Earth. Peyote says, there's something hauntingly intimate, even cosmic, about urban exploring post-Soviet infrastructure. It definitely evokes hauntology, from the smallest mosaics to those giant military installations, like a museum of intentions. Recommend Ninurta on YouTube. Yeah, do you know, I was in London on the weekend, and I feel like London is kind of, there's a lot of hauntology in London. Like, for example, when you're pulling into Battersea Station on that line going into Waterloo, the Reading line that goes into Waterloo, you look across and you can just see there's this, they call them ghost signs, and it just says dining rooms. Okay. And I was like, well, I wonder what that dining rooms was. Right. And I tried to find any information about it online. There's no information anywhere. So you just have to kind of imagine what those dining rooms were, who went there, when they were built. And all of London is like that. It's like, you know, you're kind of like walking through the ruins of somewhere that was once great. And now everything's like, you know, if it hasn't been turned into an art installation or a set of luxury flats or whatever, it's just kind of been left to the kind of mist of time. It's kind of weird. London is a very strange place.
It's very like that little film that Ferro posted recently, the from the Monitor series of the BBC in 1959. It was Sir John Betjeman, a poet in London. He's wandering around the kind of the ruined areas after the war in London, but as we approach the 60s and all the redevelopment, it's sort of inexpressibly poignant as he's going to these, you know, the ruined radio station at Aldersgate, you know, and you're seeing exactly those kind of little specters of the past peeping through, and they're about to be swept away.
Have you ever been through that tunnel that's full of graffiti near Waterloo? I've never been through there. I went through there on Saturday.
I saw your post. I haven't seen that one myself.
It's a weird place because it's like literally covered, and the graffiti is quite big. It's like up on the ceiling there's a giant woman's face, and I was walking through there, and I was like, there were women, middle-aged white women in white overalls, okay, with kind of big things of paint doing the graffiti. And I was thinking, there's something wrong about this. This is like, not only did it feel
inorganic,
somewhat sinister walking through there, especially I had the 5-year-old with me as well. I was like, this feels odd walking through here. Vague smell of dope in the air as well. But the fact that the graffiti was done by these middle-aged women made me think like we're a long way from the original because graffiti is meant to be one of the 4 pillars of hip hop, believe it or not. Do you know what the 4 pillars of hip hop are, Nick?
Graffiti, violence, the police, having a go at the police,
hose.
No.
You guys don't know the difference between hip hop and rap, do you?
I'll tell you. I'll never give you the education, right? The 4 pillars of hip hop are MCing, that's the rapping, scratching, that's the DJing. But you know when they get on the deck, scratching, graffiti, and break dancing. Those are the 4 pillars. Yeah.
I got 1 out of 4. Can I just say that could easily be in a Curtis film, couldn't it? Like even the authentic expression of graffiti no longer took place, and middle-aged women were forced to come in and do it instead.
Bizarre, so bizarre.
In the past, we thought that graffiti was something done by.
And I tell you, we went down.
This was a fantasy.
We went down to the South Bank as well. And I don't know, I think the Saatchi Gallery's gone because it's all like a theme park down there now. It's like, there's Shrek's Adventure and Paddington World and Sea Life, and they've got all these banners going down the Thames on the way to Big Ben, which is looking pretty good at the moment. They've done it up. The scaffolding is gone, but it was just absolutely rammed, and it was like being in Nairobi or something. You know, it was kind of full of Africans and. Like huge amounts of Indians there, random German gangs of tourists, and you can tell they're German because they've got their backpacks on and they're saying things like Schwein and things like that. And I was just like, even that area feels like it's a distant memory from the South Bank I remember going down to 10, 15 years ago. Yeah. And I had a look at what was on at the South Bank, like what was showing in the National Theatre and so on. And literally, I'm not kidding you, it's wall to wall, like Afro-Cuban dance. It's, this guy talking about how important it is to, get in touch with his Afro-Caribbean roots. Like literally every single thing is some like African homage. Yeah, you did like wall to wall. There's not like anything at all that would suggest that you're in London anymore in that area. So...
That's depressing. It used to be nice down there, didn't it? You have the little bookshops, your little secondhand books. You'd have the Tarkovsky at the BFI or something, and it was quite civilized.
The reason we went down there is because I fancied a Frenchies, which is that stand in the South Bank where they do duck. You can get duck roll. They were famous for it. It's gone. It's been replaced by a fucking Ethiopian vegan stall now, or whatever. I couldn't even get a Frenchies duck roll. Yeah, it's all gone to pot. Tell you. All over. Anyway, Seamus O'Blaine says, and there is evidence the Imperial Japanese were behind the Nation of Islam and the grey wolves in Turkey. Semi Agog did a video on it, supposedly demoralization. Broman Hank says AA is still on the HNH hit list, but busy supporting Jeremy Corbyn and defending Stalin's honor. Would this be a case of hypernormalization? I mean, the thing is, nothing those guys say is of any relevance whatsoever, in my opinion. As I'm sure anybody else who's ever been hit by them will know. Just pay them no attention at all at this point. All right. In terms of promoting stuff, Nick, what you got on? What you got coming up?
Well, I've got my channel as always, Nick Dixon, my YouTube. Got a podcast coming out today. You can go and look at the stream me and Simon did on there. Well, I'm sure we'll do more. And everything else is at nickdixon.net. If you really like my stuff, and why wouldn't you? That's where you can go. Thank you very much.
Simon, anything you want to draw people's attention to?
Not particularly. I would just, promote Horace's Substack, Nick's fine live streams, and I'm on Twitter at Simon__Roberts.
Yeah, I'll just thanks again for the plug, Simon. I'll just repeat that if you follow Simon on Twitter, you get the sort of red button of the deepest lore, the extra lore, the even deeper lore. You get extra content for people who want to know all because Simon researches the music, where the clips come from, and all sorts. So
I'll stick on the clip of Yurchak talking about Lenin's body. Is a really interesting lecture he gave in Lisbon a few years ago.
It's an impressive amount of work that goes into it. Thank you, Simon. And can I just say, I'm at Nick Dixon on Twitter. Why did I say that? I'm at NJ Dixon. I can't get my blooming name. That's what's really annoying. And I'm almost at 50,000 followers if you want to follow me. And I was neck and neck with AA for a long time, like identical followers. Then he suddenly botted himself up to like some massive amount. Now it's reduced again. He's just ahead of me, but we're pretty close.
I don't know what happened. That was a weird week because that was the same week I got the massive influx of views from India on here, which is still blighting my demographics. And then the same thing happened on my Twitter, and then they all disappeared again. I don't know what. That was a very odd week. I don't know what was going on there, but yes. Please do pick up a course at the academic agency. Of course, Trivium, Foundations of Shakespeare, like we talked about before. Supporting of all, everybody. Get out.
What goes on in this town is none of your business.
As long as I'm living here, it is.
Then maybe you shouldn't be living here!
Well, that's easily fixed.